The two brothers were about to kill each other, yet their father didn't even bat an eye. But the moment their fight threatened the little sister nearby, the man could no longer sit still and immediately shielded his daughter in his arms. The girl was still young and shouldn't be dragged into this royal war. However, in the next second, a red magic circle appeared in the girl's hand. This was followed by a massive explosion, successfully stopping the two brothers from their fratricidal fight. Everyone assumed the girl was a genius, entirely unaware that inside her tiny body lived the soul of a 300-year-old witch. She possessed the power to destroy an entire country with a flick of her wrist, but was betrayed by the only human she had ever trusted. Reincarnated as the youngest princess of the royal family, she was determined to get her revenge. She tried to sense the spiritual energy within this new body, and what she felt in the next second left her shocked. She actually had spiritual energy approaching the 5-star level. In her past life, she was only at 2 stars, which meant she was a veritable prodigy now. Maybe she should just conquer the continent for fun in this life? But right now, she was still a helpless infant who couldn't even take care of herself. Every day, she had to rely on a maid to change her diapers. If shame could kill, she would have died countless times over. One day, as the maid was taking her out for a walk, they unexpectedly ran into the emperor. An overwhelming sense of pressure hit them instantly. The terrified maid quickly bowed in greeting. The girl, however, just stared blankly at this strange man. He's quite handsome, she thought. The emperor looked at his daughter's dark silver hair and red eyes, traits that closely resembled those of the previous emperor. This was proof enough that the girl possessed a purer royal bloodline than he did. He reached out his hand to confirm it, but suddenly a surge of powerful energy rushed into the girl's body. It was so agonizing that it brought tears to her eyes, so she grabbed the man's hand and bit down hard. Unfortunately, she didn't have any teeth yet, so the bite didn't hurt at all. The emperor found it rather amusing. This child neither cries nor screams, but instead opens her mouth to bite. How interesting. From now on, her name shall be Leona. I hope that one day your teeth will be sharp enough to help you survive the royal war. He then ordered the maid to take little Leona to choose a sword. The so-called sword was actually the group of royal guards standing before them. They were sworn to protect the safety of the royal family with their lives and would play a crucial role in the royal war. For in this empire, to become the emperor, one had to kill all their other siblings. And this madman standing before her had slaughtered his 37 brothers and sisters to claim the throne. To leave such a critical decision to a 6-month-old infant was absurd. It made Leona silently curse, "Is this emperor dad out of his mind?" Fortunately, Leona retained the memories of her past life. She pointed her finger at an inconspicuous short-haired woman in the crowd. The quiet hall instantly erupted into murmurs. As expected, letting an infant choose a sword is just a joke, right? Yet the emperor gave a satisfied smile. Could it really be as His Majesty said? The woman had heard in the palace yesterday that the emperor highly valued his youngest daughter. Because of this, she had rejected an agreement with the second prince and came here, witnessing the princess's choice with her own eyes. This short-haired woman seemed ordinary, but she was actually the strongest necromancer on the continent, possessing the ability to awaken the dead. One person alone was equivalent to an entire army. It seemed the princess was truly someone to look forward to. Besides, the more she looked at the baby, the cuter she found her, and she really wanted to poke those chubby cheeks. My heart can barely take it. Just then, Leona turned her head and their eyes met. The necromancer finally couldn't control her pounding heart and fainted with a smile on her face. Leona was dumbfounded. Why did she faint just from looking at me? Is it because I'm too ugly? Never mind, I won't worry about it. The most important thing now was the necromancer she had chosen, Keith Abet. With her help, she was one step closer to dominating the continent. However, when Leona reached out her little hands asking for a hug, Keith instinctively took a step back. Leona froze, her face full of grievance. She had wanted to get along normally, but was met with distance instead. Since it had come to this, she had no choice but to use her ultimate weapon. In the next second, tears streamed down her face. Keith panicked instantly, thinking the princess was feeling unwell. She immediately dragged a healer in from outside, begging them to treat the princess. Leona's head was full of question marks. She wasn't sick, but her small hand was still grabbed by the healer. As a gentle wave of spiritual energy flowed out, the healer was shocked. How is this possible? There's a wild, magical energy rampaging inside the princess's body. If she isn't treated immediately, her life could be in danger. Leona glared at the healer. Must be a quack. She hadn't felt the slightest bit of discomfort. But after the healer finished the treatment, Leona could only admit how comfortable it felt. Keith looked at the sleeping little girl and couldn't resist gently poking her cheek. She was simply too adorable, just like a little bunny. Keith silently swore in her heart that she would protect the little princess with her life. A dirty stuffed bunny was treated as a treasure by the princess, who even hugged it tightly while she slept. It turned out that this toy had been kept by her mother since childhood. Moreover, it contained a rich amount of residual spiritual energy. As long as she hugged it, the energy would automatically flow into the princess's body. But when she woke up, she suddenly found herself being carried down a pitch-black path. Is this princess being kidnapped? After listening to the conversation between the maid and Keith for a moment, she realized the emperor had ordered her to move to the Black Rose Palace. Keith was full of doubt. No one had lived there for many years. Rumor had it that the previous first prince had slaughtered the entire royal family there, which was why it was frequently haunted by ghosts. Because of this, Harik, who had been completely won over by the princess's cute looks, specially sought out the emperor to beg him to rescind the order. How could you bear to make her move there? The emperor, however, stated that it was Leona's mother's dying wish to have her daughter live in the very place she once did. Now their only hope lay in Keith, the strongest necromancer on the continent, to ensure the princess's safety. Leona wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she was filled with curiosity about the palace. She sensed the exact same spiritual energy here as on her stuffed bunny, and the closer she got, the stronger it became. So she kept waving her tiny hands, signaling the maid to take her inside quickly. Suddenly, a figure appeared and blocked their path. It was the fourth prince, Nikal. His purpose for coming was to assert dominance over this princess who wasn't even a year old. But that was only what he had planned before arriving. The moment he saw Leona's face, he was instantly stunned. How can anyone be this cute? I feel like my heart is going to jump out of my chest. Suddenly, he noticed the dirty stuffed toy Leona was holding. How could you give her such trash? Throw it away immediately. A sister this adorable should obviously be holding an expensive, high-quality toy gifted by me. That's the only way it makes sense. The maid unexpectedly explained. That is a gift left to the princess by her late mother. Such a cute little thing had such a pitiful background, yet he had actually come intending to bully her. He felt like a monster. Don't live so pitifully from now on, got it? He then raised his hand and released a gentle stream of spiritual energy. This is the blessing of the sun god. Leona reached out her tiny hand and grasped at it, feeling very comfortable. Nikal instinctively wanted to hold that chubby little hand, but he pulled his hand back. I'm leaving now. Remember, absolutely do not lock the door. I will come back. However, Keith and the maid silently agreed to lock the door as quickly as possible. They couldn't let him bother the princess again. In the blink of an eye, 2.5 years passed, and Leona was now 3 years old. During this time, she had learned to walk and could communicate normally. The only thing that hadn't changed was that she remained as adorable as ever. Nikal came to see her almost every day, always reaching out his evil hands to constantly rub her chubby cheeks. But Keith stopped him every single time, leading to frequent bickering between the two, as if they were vying for her favor. Watching this scene, Leona showed a sad expression, as it brought back memories from the past. In her previous life, while she was wandering the streets, she accidentally met a man. He handed her a piece of bread and offered to take care of her. Being young and naive, she didn't know to be wary of kindness that expected nothing in return, so she began to rely on this man and followed him everywhere. She thought she would never have to go hungry again, never expecting that what awaited her was endless torment. It turned out that the man was obsessed with injecting demonic power into human bodies to create lethal weapons. Countless children fell victim to his cruel experiments, but Leona managed to survive time and time again, eventually becoming a witch. Armed with power, her first action was to escape that hellhole, yet she eventually ran into that man again. Out of pity, Leona saved him and used her formidable strength to help him ascend the throne. But all of this was repaid with betrayal, which was why she now refused to trust anyone. At that moment, Nikal interrupted her thoughts. Seeing her sad expression, he thought she was feeling unwell and hurried to call a doctor. Leona grabbed his hand and assured him she was fine.
Can you guys stop arguing?
Hearing this, Nikal obediently covered his mouth but still looked incredibly happy, leaving Leona quite speechless. Suddenly, Nikal placed his hand on her face again. Don't be sad. Your brother will always be by your side. I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise. Keith chimed in as well, stating that as the princess's sword, she would swear to protect her safety with her life. You see, there are already 2 people protecting you now, and there will definitely be more in the future. So, little bunny, you should be happy. Leona felt herself wavering. Should she really trust them? The little girl who had endured 300 years of loneliness was finally experiencing what it felt like to be protected. However, the price she had to pay was having her chubby cheeks constantly pinched. Stop it, all of you. I'm not a child, I'm a great witch who has lived for over 300 years. Seeing her brother trembling nearby, she was finally satisfied. This was the level of intimidation a great witch like herself should have. Little did she know, her brother was actually just melting over her adorable, lispy pronunciation. Right at that moment, a stream of black mist surged into the room. Sensing that something was wrong, both Keith and Nicole activated their magic circles and instantly defeated the hidden assassins. Once they confirmed Leona was unharmed, they began to inspect the assassins' identities. They had intended to leave one alive for interrogation. Why did you hit them so hard? Don't look at me, I didn't deal a lethal blow either. Just then, Harik walked in. It turned out he was the one who had struck the final blow. You guys are so slow, how can you protect the princess? Could you learn a thing or two from me? Right, princess? However, Leona wasn't buying it at all and simply turned her head away. Even her back is so cute, as expected of the princess. Suddenly, Harik remembered his actual purpose for coming. He had almost forgotten the important matter at hand. He was there to inform Nicole that the second prince was hosting a birthday banquet over the next 2 days, and the emperor had ordered all royal family members to attend. Nicole was shocked. Does everyone include the little bunny? After getting a negative answer from Harik, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, Leona tugged on his clothes, indicating that she wanted to attend the birthday banquet too. Nicole refused without a second thought. The second prince was an absolute madman, and any banquet hosted by him was bound to be extremely dangerous. And then I'll just sneak in by myself. After all, she was planning to dominate the continent, and this birthday banquet was the perfect opportunity to learn more about the other princes. Thus, on the day of the banquet, she secretly hypnotized Keith, and then used flight magic to sneak over. However, halfway through her flight, she realized she was lost. I should have looked at a map first. Just then, she noticed something interesting. On the ground, countless pebbles were arranged to form the words, "Glory of the Great Empire." These must have been placed there to flatter the founding emperor. Once she became the emperor herself one day, she would definitely have something even more impressive. She would also issue a new decree, saying the word cute would be strictly forbidden. Since she had nothing better to do at the moment, she might as well destroy this place. That was more in line with the style of a great witch like herself. However, a magical barrier had been placed over the area, and touching it would trigger an alarm. But this was child's play for the witch. With a casual wave of her hand, she dispelled the barrier before her. Just as Leona was about to cause some mischief, a figure suddenly appeared behind her. It turned out to be the emperor. What are you doing here? Leona was so startled she didn't even dare to breathe. Fortunately, Harik rushed over at that moment. Seeing him as her savior, Leona quickly greeted him. Harik didn't disappoint her expectations. The princess actually spoke to me first. It was as if seeing her smile had brought him to the absolute peak of his life. Suddenly, a slap brought him back to reality. The emperor pointed at Leona and asked, "What is this thing?" Leona was dumbfounded. Was he talking about her? Harik was equally helpless. "This is your daughter, the one you think so highly of." Looking at the emperor's expression, it was obvious he didn't remember. It was infuriating. If Harik could actually win in a fight against him, he definitely would have buried him right then and there. After Harik spent a long time explaining, the emperor finally seemed to recall her. A moment later, a voice laced with spiritual energy rang out. "Why are you here?" Leona was too scared to answer and quickly flashed her innocent, naive smile, hoping the emperor would fall for it. But apparently the emperor was immune to cuteness, though it deeply struck Harik's heart once again. "This is His Majesty the Emperor, so you must bow to him now and call him Royal Father," Harik instructed. But to his surprise, Leona puffed her cheeks and pouted. "I don't want to." She then shouted 2 words at the top of her lungs. "Daddy! Daddy, can you take me to the birthday banquet?" To everyone's shock, the emperor actually picked her up in the next second. Leona was thrilled. It seemed her act really worked. However, his next words made her freeze once more. "How did you break the barrier?" In that instant, her mind raced, and she quickly put on a totally clueless expression. "What's a barrier?" The emperor was left speechless, but he couldn't exactly do anything to such a young child. He simply set her down on the ground. "Follow me, I'll take you to the banquet." But Leona wasn't satisfied with that. She grabbed his clothes and pleaded, "Daddy, can you carry me again?" Harik was completely flabbergasted. Knowing the emperor's temper, he feared something terrible was about to happen. Harik immediately offered to carry her himself, but Leona completely rejected him. "I don't want you, I want Daddy to carry me." And then, something astonishing happened once more. The emperor actually picked her up and held her in his arms. Am I seeing things? His Majesty is actually letting the princess act spoiled. This is unprecedented. How crazy was the second prince? If a maid placed his tableware just 2 millimeters off, he would try to strangle her with a ruler, leaving the maid kneeling on the floor begging for mercy. Even when the fourth prince Nicole pleaded on the maid's behalf, the second prince had no intention of showing any leniency. It wasn't until Nicole brought up their father, the Emperor, that he finally let her off the hook. If I weren't afraid of your dirty blood ruining royal father's mood, none of you would live to see tomorrow's sun. Just then, the Emperor entered the hall carrying the princess. The second prince was somewhat surprised by this sight, but still respectfully invited the Emperor to take a seat. The Emperor stared at Leona for a long time. The little creature was indeed quite endearing, and he was almost reluctant to put her down. No, I must treat everyone equally, he reminded himself before casually tossing her onto a seat. Leona tugged at the Emperor's clothes. Daddy, you have to carry me next time too, okay? In response, the Emperor smiled and gently poked her little face. Seeing this, the second prince was practically radiating jealousy. Royal father is actually doting on her? He immediately decided to eliminate the princess during the banquet. He was confident his father wouldn't interfere, as he never involved himself in the wars for succession. Soon, all the princes arrived and prepared to eat. But Leona simply stared at her fork for a long time. Seeing this, the second prince frowned in displeasure. Had she noticed the poison he had coated the cutlery with? This poison was colorless, odorless, and extremely difficult to detect. How could she have found out? Little did he know, Leona was actually thinking, if I sell this pure silver fork, it would definitely fetch a good price. And why isn't the food here yet? I'm starving to death. Growing impatient, Leona started tapping the fork repeatedly on the table to vent her frustration. But the poison coated on the tableware would quickly lose its magical properties upon impact. The second prince watched with a grave expression. She had actually dismantled his poison so easily. It seemed this princess was not to be underestimated. At that moment, Leona also noticed all the eyes in the room staring at her. I'll just eat an apple to ease the awkwardness. But as she reached out, her hand bumped the table, accidentally knocking the apple onto the floor. The second prince couldn't sit still any longer. She had even discovered the poisoned apple. I definitely cannot let her live past today. He immediately blew a whistle. In the next second, assassins hidden all around the room swarmed out, instantly subduing all the princes present. The second prince then ordered his archers to aim at the princess. Let's start with her. As long as I wipe you all out today, I will be the sole heir. Witnessing this, the Emperor's expression turned incredibly dark and cold. He had long noticed the assassins lurking in the shadows, and he had assumed he wouldn't care no matter who died today. But the moment that arrow was aimed at Leona, his heart gave a sudden tremor. In a flash, he moved, picking up Leona and blocking all the attacks aimed at her. The second prince was utterly shocked. Don't you never intervene in the succession wars? But the Emperor's voice returned, cold and filled with killing intent. She is too young, and her sword is not by her side. She is in no position to join this war. It turned out the royal family had a rule. Before reaching adulthood, one could only participate in the succession battles if their designated sword was present. The second prince's face was filled with resignation. My apologies, it was an oversight on my part. At this time, the princess turned her gaze toward the fourth prince, Nicole, who was already in grave danger. She tightly gripped the Emperor's clothes, hoping he would step in and help Nicole. Arik walked over and told Leona that this was not allowed. No one could interfere in the succession disputes. But Nicole's sword isn't with him either. The fourth prince's sword isn't missing. His sword died in a previous battle. Meanwhile, Nicole was completely surrounded. He gathered his spiritual energy into his sword, preparing for a desperate life-or-death struggle. The second prince also gave the order, commanding his subordinates to unleash countless ice swords at him. Seeing this, Leona was frantic with anxiety. In that moment, she only had one thought in her mind. He absolutely cannot die. He's my foolish brother who has always protected me. Just as the countless ice swords were about to strike Nicole, a red magic circle instantly materialized in Leona's hand. In an instant, a massive fireball exploded, violently separating the attackers from Nicole. And right then, every single pair of eyes in the room fell on Leona. Oh no, I'm completely exposed now. The fact that the 3-year-old princess could use magic was finally laid bare for all to see. Because she couldn't bear to watch her foolish brother fall into danger, Leona acted in a moment of desperation, releasing a fireball that successfully blocked all the ice swords aimed at him. She hadn't expected that the fireball she casually threw was actually a Tier 4 magic spell. After all, she was just a 3-year-old child right now. At this moment, everyone's gaze shifted to her. Just as Leona was trying to think of an excuse to explain herself, Nicole had already arrived in front of her. Little bunny, I didn't know you were this amazing. If you hadn't intervened, I would have been in real danger just now. Leona continued to play dumb. I don't know what happened either. That fireball just popped out on its own. Out of embarrassment, she quickly closed her eyes and turned her head away. After all, this excuse was incredibly far-fetched. Little bunny, you're really bad at lying? At this time, the Emperor also revealed a rare smile. He gently patted Leona's little head. I never expected you to be this outstanding. It seems it's time to find you a teacher." With that, his smile vanished, and he cast a cold glare at the disheveled second prince. "That will be all for today. Everyone is dismissed." The second prince had yet to recover from his shock. Did royal father just smile? But he wasn't smiling at me. In the end, I've still disappointed him. Arik gave a thumbs up. "Princess, you were amazing." He then quickly caught up with the emperor's pace. He looked incredibly proud of himself. "I told you the princess was extraordinary. Doesn't she perfectly match what you hoped for? I hope she can firmly establish her position before the first prince returns. You will definitely help her then, right?" Hearing this, the emperor averted his gaze, recalling the scene where Leona had adorably called him Daddy. "Perhaps I will." Meanwhile, the second prince approached Leona. Thank you for saving me." Leona was confused. "Do you even hear what you're saying?" Suddenly, she noticed the injury on the second prince's chest. It turned out that Nikal's desperate life-or-death strike had actually hit the second prince. If Leona hadn't intervened in time, both of them would have been in mortal danger. "Why did you save us? Is it because you don't like seeing us fight?" She couldn't very well tell him that she only meant to save Nikal and had rescued him by pure coincidence, right? Whatever, I don't need to explain. He'll just fill in the blanks himself. Seeing her remain silent, the second prince assumed she was quietly agreeing. "So that was it. That's why you neutralized the poison I said at the banquet beforehand?" Leona was confused again. Poison? There was poison at the banquet? Suddenly, the second prince summoned a chunk of ice. "Consider this a reward for saving me. This greeting gift isn't much of a surprise, but I'll give you something better next time." Leona looked closely, only to realize that it was actually a severed arm. "Couldn't you at least ask if I wanted it first?" A week passed in the blink of an eye. Leona went to the garden alone. During these past few days, Nikal was bedridden and couldn't keep her company. Taking his place was the crazy second prince, who would always seek her out bearing strange gifts. Fortunately, after she rejected him more than 20 times, he finally gave up. However, she was now starting to feel genuinely bored. Unbeknownst to her, someone with gritted teeth was slowly approaching from behind. In the next second, that person slapped her hard on her tiny forehead. The attacker was none other than the 8th prince, the most powerful fire mage in the royal family. He had discovered that Leona's talent far surpassed his own. Out of jealousy, he decided to eliminate her today. What he failed to notice was that Leona was currently radiating a chilling aura of murderous intent. She simply raised her hand and unleashed a lightning spell, sending him flying 300 meters away. Not wanting to be outdone, he unleashed the fire magic he was so proud of. Seeing this, Leona quickly prepared to counter with ice magic. But she suddenly sensed a powerful presence heading their way. She then abruptly slapped herself hard across the face. This scene left the 8th prince completely dumbfounded. Little did he know the person approaching was the emperor. Leona immediately hugged the emperor's thigh. "Daddy, he just hit me." "Daddy, I can't beat him, please help me." The emperor let out a helpless sigh. It wasn't like he was blind. He then began to wonder why Leona was hiding her true strength. Was it really as Harik had said that she longed for her father's embrace? So she deliberately acts weak because she wants my affection? He picked Leona up and gently patted her back. "8th prince, the empire has a rule. Conflicts are forbidden when your sword is not present. Have you forgotten?" The 8th prince's face was full of grievance. He was clearly the one who had taken the real beating. But Leona wasn't satisfied yet. "Daddy, scold him some more." The emperor smiled faintly. "The 8th prince knowingly violated the rules. He is grounded for a week." Leona was somewhat surprised. She really hadn't expected her royal father to go this far for her. She then stuck her tongue out at the 8th prince. "That's what you get for secretly hitting my head." Seeing this, the 8th prince couldn't hold it in any longer and tried to voice his grievances. But all he got in return was an icy glare from the emperor. "What? Do you have an objection?" Those words nearly made him wet his pants in fear, and he had no choice but to scurry away in disgrace. Feeling thoroughly satisfied, Leona snuggled into the emperor's arms. "Thank you, Daddy." The emperor then asked the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why have you been hiding your strength all this time? This is the cruel royal family. Only by showing tremendous power can you earn people's respect." Leona clenched her tiny fists. "Because I still don't have enough strength to protect my own people." "So, you saved Nikal because you consider him your own person?" Leona nodded in agreement. "Do you know what it means to protect someone?" Her eyes were filled with determination. "It means not letting your people get hurt. That is protection." The emperor chuckled. She was young, but her sense of responsibility was quite profound. "I mentioned earlier that I would find you a teacher. Let's go meet him now." In order to prevent her foolish brother from getting hurt, she had decided to stop hiding. That had been the first time she had ever displayed her true strength in front of her family, summoning a magic circle while intense fire elements wrapped around her body. The fireball she threw had successfully blocked all the attacks for her brother. She had initially thought that exposing her power would make her family distance themselves from her, but unexpectedly, she received even more care. Even her typically cold royal father now treated her as his absolute favorite. Having witnessed Leona's extraordinary talent in magic, the emperor decided to find her a teacher. He already had the perfect candidate in mind, Zeros, the master of the magic tower, who stood before them now. Although the emperor really didn't want to see him as the most outstanding mage in the empire, Zeros was the only person qualified to be the princess's teacher in his eyes. The two of them soon arrived at Zeros' domain. When Zeros saw the adorable princess, he immediately leaned in, wanting to scoop her into his arms. This instantly triggered the emperor's displeasure. "What are you doing? Your Majesty, didn't you ask me to be her teacher? I need to examine her magical power first." Leona's expression darkened. She didn't need any of that. Zeros simply stared at her quietly, deep in thought, and then activated time magic, freezing everything in the room except for Leona. Leona started to panic. "What are you doing?" Zeros, on the other hand, looked perfectly calm. Rumor has it that the royal family of the Hades Empire shares one common trait. They all have the same colored pupils. But you are different. I can sense that the soul within your body is incredibly ancient. As he spoke, he grasped Leona's small hand. "I'm very curious, and who are you?" Leona's eyes widened. Her deepest secret had been seen through just like that. "So what exactly do you want?" Zeros reached out his hand with great interest. "Do you still want to refuse to be my apprentice now?" Leona obediently placed her hand in his. He smiled with satisfaction, assuming she had agreed. However, the response he got was Leona's lightning magic. As he yanked his hand back in pain, Leona seized the opportunity to unleash all her magical power, directly shattering Zeros' time magic. Due to the massive consumption of her mana, she began to pant heavily. Seeing Leona in such a weakened state upon coming to his senses, the emperor immediately erupted with immense magical power. A suffocating pressure instantly engulfed the entire room. "I know you used time-freezing magic. What did you just do to Leona?" Yet, Zeros maintained his playful, smiling demeanor. "I'd advise you to retract your power first, otherwise the princess might not be able to withstand it." Leona finally let out a sigh of relief. She had almost suffocated. "You had better give me a reasonable explanation," the emperor warned. "That was just so I could test Her Highness's magic in peace. The princess is outstanding, and I am very willing to be her teacher. I believe she won't refuse either. Isn't that right, princess?" Leona had intended to keep refusing, but Zeros silently mouthed the words. "If you dare to refuse, I will tell the emperor everything that just happened." Leona's face filled with despair. He actually dared to threaten her. The worst part was that she couldn't even fight back. If her emperor dad found out his daughter's body had been taken over by another soul, he would definitely hack her to pieces. Left with no other choice, Leona had to compromise. Zeros smiled in satisfaction. "I look forward to our time together, princess." That evening, Leona sat with a worried expression on her face. How on earth did he figure out my identity? And that guy always looks like he's begging for a beating. He's so annoying. Unexpectedly, the guy she was talking about had silently appeared right beside her. "Are you talking about me? That makes me so sad." This gave Leona a massive fright. She hadn't sensed his approach at all. It seemed she needed to improve her skills quickly. "I am extremely curious about your true identity, so I plan to stay by your side and observe you closely. Of course, it would be even better if we could become a bit closer." Leona was completely speechless. If she could actually beat him in a fight, she would have eliminated him long ago. Become closer? Yeah, right. Suddenly, her tiny hand was grabbed again. "Don't worry, you will soon come looking for me yourself." Having recovered from his injuries, Nikal was just about to go see Leona when he noticed the second prince acting suspiciously, crouching near the entrance of her palace. "What are you doing here?" The second prince made a shush gesture and motioned for him to look ahead. They saw the eighth prince, Eid, with a dark, sinister expression. He was threatening to burn every stuffed bunny in the palace and ordered his sword to find an opportunity to eliminate Leona. Little did he know, the two princes outside had witnessed the entire thing. "He actually wants to kill the cute little bunny. He must have a death wish." The second prince's eyes were also filled with rage. "Let's form an alliance." These two brothers, who usually fought to the death over the slightest disagreement, actually decided to team up at the exact same time. It was all because the eighth Prince Eid had targeted their beloved little sister. They both decided to teach him a harsh lesson. But in the next second, Ibek's face grew incredibly dim. He had just turned 12. In the Empire, any royal family member who reached the age of 12 had to leave the palace for practical training. It seemed he didn't have much time left to spend with his little sister. He had wanted to give her more gifts. This time, instead of strange things like a block of ice, he prepared all sorts of sweet candies. But just as he arrived at her door, Keith blocked his way. Leona gave orders that no one is to disturb her while she trains her magic. I just want to eat some sweets with my sister. If you try to stop me again, I'll freeze you into an ice sculpture. Just as the two were about to start a brawl, Leona finally hurried over. Seeing her looking completely exhausted from her magic training, Ebek's face filled with concern. Do you want me to get you some water? No, no need. Can you fight me? Ebek refused without a second thought. He only wanted to share a meal with his sister before leaving the palace. He had always been viewed as a madman by outsiders. And in this cruel royal family, he had no choice but to carry out his ruthlessness to the bitter end. In truth, he also wished for a harmonious family. But being clumsy with his words, he could only keep those thoughts buried deep in his heart. I can't fight you because you are weaker than me. I should be protecting you. Unsurprisingly, those words annoyed Leona. What if I beat you? That's impossible. If I win, you have to become my subordinate. Under Leona's persistent persuasion, he eventually agreed. Ebek thought to himself that he had to hold back and make sure not to hurt Leona. However, after several rounds of fighting, he hadn't gained the upper hand at all. He was forced to use the ice magic he excelled at. As long as he could freeze Leona's feet and immobilize her, this would all be over. But to his surprise, Leona used magic to fly into the air and summoned roaring flames that completely melted his ice. Ebek was utterly shocked. He never imagined his little sister could use such high-level magic. Even if they continued fighting, he had no chance of winning. I lost. Leona then walked over slowly and extended her hand to him. From now on, you are my subordinate. You are subordinate number 1. Now I'm going to give you a mission. She crouched down and drew a symbol on the ground. Ibek recognized it at a glance. It was the crest of the Carol Kingdom. I need you to gather intelligence on this empire and its emperor for me. But she failed to notice the dark, troubled lines forming on Ibek's face. And then what? Ibek asked. And then I help you kill the emperor of Carol. Is that it? That was basically sending him to his death. It seemed she was no different from the other royals. As expected, in a royal duel, the loser only had one path: death. Leona's eyes widened like saucers. I just asked you to gather intelligence. What are you thinking? I obviously have to kill the king of Carol with my own 2 hands. After all, he was the man who had played with her feelings and murdered her in her previous life. Hearing this, Ibek suddenly covered his face and began to sob. I'm just a loser. I never thought you'd be this good to me. It seems you truly consider me one of your own people. You are too magnanimous. He then sincerely promised, I will definitely complete the mission you assigned me. Before long, he arrived at Nikal's residence. He shattered the defensive magic there with a single strike, then smashed through the wall and entered Nikal's room. Nikal was dumbfounded. Was this guy here to pick another fight? Ibek simply dusted off his clothes. Nikal, what are you to Leona? Hey! What's wrong with you all of a sudden? Ibek continued. Seeing how you run to the Black Rose Palace every day, it turns out you're absolutely nothing to her. But I'm different. I have become Leona's subordinate. And I am subordinate number 1. Even if you go to her now, you can only be number 2. How about it? Jealous? Nikal was so riled up he couldn't even speak, but the word anger was practically written across his face. Not surprisingly, the two of them started fiercely fighting each other once again. Meanwhile, Zeros was boredly playing with a pocket watch in his hand. This is so boring. Nothing interesting has happened lately. He then thought of Leona, that murderous glare paired with that adorable face. Just thinking about it was amusing. Come to think of it, he hadn't seen her in quite a while. Thus, he immediately set off to find Leona. But right at that moment, an uninvited guest arrived. This person was none other than the king of Carol, Lacus, the very enemy Leona was so obsessed with taking revenge against, making her older brother her subordinate. Unexpectedly, not only was he not disgusted by the idea, but he actually felt deeply honored. He even went out of his way to flaunt it in front of Nikal. Nikal was so furious he couldn't speak, leading the two brothers to fiercely brawl once again. In the blink of an eye, Nikal found Leona and declared that he too wanted to be her subordinate. He promised to become even stronger than Ibek and swore to protect her safety. Leona was utterly speechless. Why would anyone eagerly volunteer to be someone else's underling? However, unable to withstand Nikal's relentless pestering, she had no choice but to agree. Nikal was overjoyed and hugged Leona tightly. That guy Ibek is number 1, right? Then I want to be number 0. Leona simply patted his head gently. As long as you're happy. After successfully shaking off Nikal, she headed to the library, ready to thoroughly investigate the Carol Kingdom. However, after searching for half the day, she only found useless information. Suddenly, Zeros appeared behind her. It startled her so much she nearly tumbled down the stairs. Fortunately, Zeros caught her in time. But this close contact allowed her to catch a whiff of the scent on his body. It was a scent she would never forget in her entire life. It was the scent of Lacus. Filled with rage, she instantly materialized a magical chain and wrapped it tightly around Zeros' neck. Her sudden action left Zeros dumbfounded, unable to understand why she was reacting so violently. Leona also realized her behavior was a bit extreme. She needed to find an excuse quickly so as not to arouse his suspicions. "Did you hug a puppy before coming here? Didn't you know I'm allergic to dog hair?" As she spoke, she convincingly faked a few sneezes. Seeing this, Zeros immediately used magic to change his clothes. Leona looked at him as if she had just discovered a new continent. "What kind of magic did you just use? Do you want to learn? I can teach you." Leona's eyes were filled with longing. "Of course I want to. If you don't teach me, you're truly not human." Just then, Zeros noticed the book in her hand. "It seems you are very interested in the Carol Kingdom. You must have been there before, haven't you?" Zeros didn't hide anything regarding this, admitting that he had met someone from the Carol Kingdom right before coming to see her. But when Leona pressed for more details, he said he couldn't reveal anything else because he was currently facing a difficult dilemma. After all, this involved matters between two major empires. If he made the wrong choice, his future days would be quite miserable. Leona abruptly grabbed him by the collar. Choose me, choose me. You are my teacher, after all." Zeros, however, slowly pulled out a single gold coin. "And what will you give me in return?" Hearing this, Leona smiled faintly. "I have many ways to make money." With a snap of her fingers, countless gold coins rained down from thin air, completely filling the entire library. "As long as you choose me, all of this is yours." Zeros hesitated for a moment, then walked up to Leona and knelt before her. "I will definitely do my best to assist you." But Leona wasn't stupid. She knew these words were as empty as the wind. "I want you to swear a spiritual oath and agree to 3 conditions." Spiritual energy was tied to a mage's life force. Breaking such an oath would result in a severe backlash. Zeros fully understood the weight of such an oath, but he also trusted his own judgment. "State your conditions. First, you must not tell anyone the secret about my soul. Second, until I become emperor, you must stay by my side and be at my beck and call. Finally, you must maintain your relationship with the Carol Empire and provide me with advantageous intelligence. The duration of this contract will last until I reach adulthood." Hearing this, Zeros breathed a sigh of relief. He had thought he'd be bound for his entire life. He then released his spiritual energy to make the oath, and a magical crest appeared on Leona's hand. Seeing the contract finalized, Leona shot Zeros a mischievous look. "Actually, this isn't my money. These are the gold coins of the Empire's founding emperor, Esgina. If you take them, he might kill you." Looking at Zeros' dumbfounded expression, Leona kindly offered to pay him a monthly salary of about 10 gold coins. As soon as the words left her mouth, she used spatial magic to escape, leaving him standing there in a daze. The single opportunity to make a spiritual oath in his lifetime had been scammed out of him just like that. If word got out, he'd be the laughingstock of all the other mages. Speaking of which, how did she even get Esgina's gold coins? That guy had been missing for 30 years. Suddenly, Harik walked over. "Who allowed you to meet the princess here secretly? It would be a disaster if the princess was mesmerized by that face of yours." Zeros was slightly speechless. "Didn't you guys ask me to be her teacher?" But seeing Harik's resentful glare, he decided to tease him a bit. "I think Her Highness the Princess is very interesting. She possesses immense research value." But in the next second, an icy voice rang out. It was the Emperor. "What exactly do you mean by research value?" The atmosphere in the room instantly grew tense. Just as the two erupted with magical power and prepared to fight, Harik's voice came from the side. "If you two don't retract your magic right now, the library will be completely destroyed." Seeing that he couldn't persuade them, he had no choice but to bring up Leona. "I heard that Her Highness the Princess really likes this place. If it gets destroyed, she will definitely be very sad." The Emperor let out a light sigh. "I will let you off this time. But if you dare to hurt Leona, I will make your magic tower disappear from this world." Zeros was also filled with anger. If he hadn't promised Leona not to expose the secret of her soul, he wouldn't be subjected to such treatment. He immediately dropped his own harsh words. "Just wait and see. You'll all be in for it in the future." Meanwhile, the 8th prince, Eid, was raging helplessly at home because he had just suffered a severe beating from Nikal and Ebek. "What's the price for bullying my little sister?" Just as he was plotting how to get his revenge, he received a letter from the 1st prince. Could it be that he was returning? The little girl never imagined that she herself was the source of all the disasters. It turned out that just last night, as Leona was preparing to rest, an assassin unexpectedly broke into her room. Having depleted all her mana teasing Zeros earlier that day, Leona was so terrified she squeezed her eyes tightly shut. However, the attack never landed on her. When she finally opened her eyes, she found that the assassin was already dead. And the person who had dispatched the assassin was actually the maid who had been by her side all this time. Early the next morning, Leona couldn't wait to ask about the maid's true identity. It turned out that the maid was originally a guard for her mother, Her Highness Epera. Her mother's original identity was that of a princess from the Elan Duchy. However, the duchy suffered an invasion from the Carol Kingdom. Left with no other options, they reached a peace agreement with the Empire, which involved marrying the princess off to the current emperor. To this day, the maid still brooded over that matter. Back then, the Carol Kingdom was initially no match for them. Unexpectedly, a powerful mage suddenly appeared in the enemy's army and single-handedly wiped out an entire legion of their troops. As she spoke, she unconsciously squeezed Leona's tiny hand. If it weren't for that mage, our Elan Duchy would definitely be much better off than it is now. Little did she know, the very mage she spoke of was none other than Leona. In her previous life, as the Great Witch, she was the absolute pillar of the Carol Kingdom. Originally, she had strongly opposed the attack on the Elan Duchy, but Lacus obstinately insisted on leading the troops to start the war himself. Unable to bear watching Lacus die on the battlefield, she had finally decided to intervene. If she hadn't stood by Lacus's side back then, the Elan Duchy wouldn't have been reduced to a vassal state of the Empire, her mother wouldn't have been forced to marry the Emperor, and ultimately, she wouldn't have died in childbirth. Seeing Leona's deeply conflicted expression, the maid assumed she was missing her mother and quickly offered words of comfort. She mentioned that for Leona's 5th birthday, a diplomatic delegation from the duchy would visit the Empire. Among them would be the Grand Duke himself, who was her mother's father. Hearing this, Leona was completely dumbfounded. Isn't that the king of the Elan Duchy, the one I almost annihilated? If he discovered her true identity, she would be completely ruined. If only she had known, she wouldn't have exposed her magical abilities. Meanwhile, the 3 people waiting over there had long run out of patience. The moment he saw Leona arrive, the Emperor quickly used magic to pull the unprepared Leona right into his arms. You must be tired from walking, so I'll reluctantly carry you. You should thank me. Leona was totally bewildered. He clearly just wanted to hug her himself. Still, she followed the Emperor's words. Thank you, Daddy. She had no choice. Her father was her own to spoil. Just then, the second Prince Ebek ran over. He was about to leave the palace and had come to bid farewell to his royal father and Leona. However, the Emperor had absolutely no reaction to this, as if he didn't care at all. Leona couldn't stand watching this, so she tugged at the Emperor's collar. Daddy, aren't you going to tell Ebek have a safe trip? Doesn't the book say that's what you're supposed to say when seeing someone off? The maid and Herrick standing nearby didn't dare make a sound. How could such words ever come out of the Emperor's mouth? Daddy, is it okay if I don't greet you when I go on a long trip? Hearing this, the Emperor finally spoke slowly. Have a safe trip. This scene was clearly something Ebek hadn't expected. Thank you. And thank you too, Leona. He then grabbed Leona's tiny hand and promised he would definitely fulfill their agreement. Noticing that he still hadn't let go, Leona asked, Is there something else you need? Nicole bragged to me earlier that you patted his head. Could you pat mine too? Leona was quite speechless, not understanding why anyone would brag about something like that, but she thoughtfully gave Ibek's head a gentle pat anyway. This made him, who was usually so cold and aloof, as happy as a child. But suddenly, Leona realized that the arm her royal father was holding her with had tightened its grip. You are not allowed to do that next time. I know you won the duel against Ibek. Why didn't you kill him? Because he's my family now. How can I kill my family? This statement made Zeros, who was standing nearby, burst out laughing. Her royal father had literally slaughtered 37 siblings to sit on the throne. Realizing her slip of the tongue, Leona immediately changed her tune, stating that she just didn't like killing people. In truth, the Emperor had once shared Leona's exact thoughts, but he later discovered that his mercy was only met with ruthless betrayal. He didn't want his daughter to experience the pain of betrayal, but he also didn't want her to be called a cold-blooded, heartless monster like him. He gently patted Leona's little head. Anyway, as long as he was around, no one would ever be able to hurt her. Soon they arrived at the reception room, where the priest had already been waiting for a long time. It turned out the Emperor had planned early on to invite the priest to bestow a blessing upon Leona. The priest had not expected the Emperor to value such a small girl so highly. He grasped Leona's tiny hand and slowly began to channel his magical energy into her body. While bestowing his blessing, he also wanted to probe the depths of Leona's true power. To his complete surprise, his magical energy began flowing into Leona uncontrollably. If this continues, my mana will be completely drained. Meanwhile, Leona was also in excruciating pain. She simply couldn't handle such a massive influx of magic. She quickly yanked her hand back. What are you doing? That hurts so much. Seeing this, the emperor was instantly furious. Why would a blessing cause her pain? The priest wanted to explain, but suddenly thought of something. He then channeled a very small amount of mana into Leona's hand once more, which allowed him to reach a conclusion. Her Highness's body is like a bottomless pit. It's simply unimaginable how much magical energy she can contain. This is something only a dragon could achieve. The princess most likely possesses the body of a dragon. Because she was born with dark silver hair, she was regarded as a descendant of dragons. It was for this very reason that the emperor had specially invited the priest to bless her. Many nobles and ministers had also sent gifts, hoping to curry favor with her. Thus, the maid suggested hosting a banquet for her next birthday, as it would help elevate Leona's prestige within the empire. Leona had her own ideas as well. Although she was deeply loved by the emperor and her brother Nikal, she still didn't know much about the various noble factions. The next birthday banquet would be the perfect opportunity to observe those high-ranking figures. Arik thought this was a good decision. The first prince would be returning soon, and the princess needed to quickly establish a firm foothold. Leona felt a bit puzzled. She kept hearing rumors about the first prince lately. Was that guy really that powerful? Just then, Nikal arrived and warned Leona to stay as far away from the first prince as possible. The guy was a complete lunatic who never showed mercy to anyone weaker than himself. Nikal had once fought the first prince and lost miserably. However, the first prince hadn't killed him. Instead, he had locked him up and toyed with him like a lab rat. To this day, Nikal was still traumatized by the experience. Upon hearing this, Leona was immediately infuriated. He actually dared to bully my person! She then offered to give Nikal special training. You must defeat that guy yourself, do you hear me? The two of them quickly headed to the training grounds. Nikal seemed a bit hesitant. He was terrified of the first prince from the bottom of his heart. Moreover, that guy was the son of their granduncle, and their granduncle was the current pope. Curious, Leona asked, is the pope even stronger than the emperor? That question struck Nikal right in his sore spot like an iron nail. Seeing Leona summon a magic circle to begin his special training, he immediately chose to run away. I don't want to get beaten up. Left with no other option, Leona began her own training instead. She soon felt a strange cluster of energy within her body. She didn't know what it was, but she could clearly sense its immense power. But right at that moment, a surge of black magic shot toward her, piercing straight through her shoulder. A person then slowly walked over. It was the 8th prince, accompanied by an assassin belonging to the first prince. This time, he was determined to wipe away his previous humiliation and immediately ordered the assassin, "Kill her!" Watching the black magic transform into a sharp blade hurtling toward her, Leona had no room to fight back. Because her training had been abruptly interrupted, she was currently suffering a severe magical backlash. Meanwhile, the assassin was already gathering energy for an even stronger attack. Leona knew very well that if this attack landed, she would undoubtedly die. Faced with this crisis, she disregarded the consequences and chose to absorb that strange cluster of energy. She instantly erupted with terrifying magical power, ready for a desperate fight to the death. But for some unknown reason, the assassin and the 8th prince suddenly collapsed to the ground in front of her. Just as she was feeling confused by this, a strange voice called out, "Hello, Leona. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time." Meanwhile, far away in the palace, the emperor abruptly stood up. The first prince has returned. At the same time, the emperor sensed that Leona's life force was extremely weak, so he immediately set off toward her palace. Meanwhile, the first prince was mockingly asking about Leona's injuries. Seeing her display immense resistance toward him, he dropped the act and ordered his subordinates to bring in the defeated Keith and Nikal. You're not waiting for them to save you, are you? Actually, it completely exceeded my expectations that you could hold out against that assassin's attack until now. This proves that you are very strong enough to be worthy of me. So let's get married when you grow up. Leona looked completely bewildered. Do you even hear the nonsense coming out of your mouth? My father once said that for the future of humanity, the strong must join forces to conceive the next generation. Aren't you curious just how powerful a child inheriting both our strengths could be? Her only response was a flaming arrow summoned through her magic. She absolutely despised this first prince. His eyes were just as sickening as the guys who had used children for their twisted experiments. She then unleashed her fire magic, instantly engulfing the first prince in flames. But she had neglected the presence of another person. Her actions also successfully enraged the first prince. Since she was an enemy, he had to eliminate her quickly by the roots. Suddenly, a massive sword materialized in midair. Goodbye, interesting Leona. Watching the giant sword slowly approach her, Leona couldn't help but think of everyone who had stayed by her side. What a pity. It was all going to end just like this. At that very critical moment, several bolts of lightning crashed down from the sky, blocking the attack for her. Someone then scooped Leona into a warm embrace. That's right, Her daddy had finally arrived. Leona finally couldn't hold it in anymore, and tears streamed down her face. She threw herself into the Emperor's arms. "What took you so long? Those bad guys actually ambushed me while I was training. It hurt so much I almost died." The Emperor slowly wiped her tears away. "Leona, you won't die because you are my daughter." Hearing this, Leona hugged him even tighter. In the past, her royal father had always called her princess. This was the very first time he had referred to her as his daughter. "Daddy, you have to help me teach that guy a lesson." Having said that, she fainted into a deep sleep. Upon hearing those words, the first prince immediately panicked. "This is a battle for succession. According to the rules, even you cannot interfere carelessly. Therefore, you should put Leona down and let us finish our incomplete battle." In the next second, the Emperor summoned countless ice spikes and viciously hurled them at the first prince. "Insolent first prince, you are far too arrogant." When the older brothers tried to kill their younger brothers or sisters, this father wouldn't even blink an eye. But the moment they tried to lay a hand on his youngest daughter, the man couldn't sit still for even a second. He immediately reached out, shielded his daughter in his arms, and blocked all the attacks for her. He then severely injured the first prince who had launched the attack. Even after more than 10 days, the ice covering his body still hadn't melted. No one expected the Emperor to be so ruthless. The first prince could only blame all of this on Leona, vowing to make her pay the price. Unbeknownst to him, Zeros had already entered his room and dispatched the guards at the door. Seeing that the intruder came with ill intentions, he quickly summoned a magic circle. Zeros, however, paid it no mind. "If you weren't the Pope's son, I would have killed you all." The first prince looked astonished. "Are you on the princess's side as well?" "Bingo. So if I don't beat you half to death right now, I really wouldn't have the face to see her again. After all, you went way too far when you attacked Her Highness." Meanwhile, Leona's injuries had mostly healed. She recalled the moment her royal father had come to save her. In this life, she was finally no longer alone. She then thought of the mother she had never met. What kind of person was she really? Just then, Zeros appeared by her side. "Long time no see, Leona." However, Leona met him with a cold expression, not even wanting to acknowledge him. She had been beaten half to death, and this supposed teacher of hers was nowhere to be found. Seeing this, Zeros immediately mentioned that before coming here, he had already paid a visit to the first prince to teach him a lesson. Leona instantly transformed into a master of changing faces. "You did very well. But once I become stronger, I must definitely teach him a lesson personally." Zeros then asked, "By the way, why did the first prince harbor so much hostility toward you?" "That lunatic seemed to have proposed to me, but I rejected him," Leona replied. Hearing this, Zeros' expression darkened instantly. Had he known about this, he wouldn't have let the first prince live, even if it meant risking making an enemy of the Pope. It seemed there wasn't a single normal person in this palace. He then suggested the idea of taking Leona away from the palace. However, Leona's single sentence sent his hopes plummeting to the bottom. "But you're a lunatic too. Besides, my goal is to become the Emperor. How could I possibly leave here?" But Zeros still couldn't put his mind at ease. He offered to give Leona special training in a couple of days. He knew that with Leona's temperament, she definitely wouldn't stand being bullied. So once she finished her training, she could properly deal with anyone who dared to bully her again. After successfully shaking off Zeros, she went to find Nikal and asked him if her mother had left anything behind. After learning that all of her mother's belongings were kept in the Dandelion Palace, she sneaked over there with Keith under the cover of night. However, a defensive barrier had been set up at the palace entrance. Only those with royal blood could enter. She had no choice but to tell Keith to wait outside while she went in alone to investigate. Looking at the incredibly desolate palace before her, Leona felt a pang of sorrow in her heart. If her mother were still alive, she would definitely hate her to death for stealing her daughter's body, right? Little did she know she was about to get an answer to this question very soon. As soon as she entered the room, a notebook began to flip its pages automatically, as if guided by some unseen force. It was a diary left behind by her mother, chronicling the entire journey from her pregnancy to giving birth. March 2nd, I never expected that I would become a mother. It's truly unbelievable. In the days that followed, she was filled with anticipation for the child growing in her womb. Sometime into the pregnancy, she began experiencing agonizing pain in her stomach. Tormented by the severe pain every single day, she even entertained the thought of giving up on the child. But she persevered and gradually adapted to the ordeal. The Emperor often remarked that the child was as active as a lion. Because of those words, she had decided on a name for the child early on: Leona. Reading this, Leona finally realized that her name had been chosen long ago. It wasn't something the Emperor had thought of on the spot. Did something happen in between? The diary quickly progressed to August 21st. The pain in her stomach had become tearing and excruciating, so intense that she even fell into a coma. It wasn't until a healer came to diagnose her that she understood the cause of the pain. The child seemed to have lost its vitality long ago. As a mage, she could sense that the child had no soul. She blamed herself immensely, believing that her earlier thoughts of giving up had broken the child's heart. If she had treated the child as a blessing from the very beginning, perhaps the baby would have survived. Seeing this, Leona couldn't help but feel a sharp ache in her heart. But when she flipped to the next page, it surprisingly stated that her mother had found a way to save the child. Right at that moment, a letter fell out of the diary. To Leona's astonishment, this letter contained the answers to every single doubt she had in her heart. The reason Leona was able to come to this world was because her mother had sacrificed her own life, using black magic to place Leona's soul into this body. Although her mother didn't know whose soul it was, the fact that it answered her summons meant that this soul must have been incredibly lonely, carrying immense pain and unwillingness in its heart. Furthermore, her mother never believed that Leona had stolen her daughter's body. On the contrary, she felt that Leona had bestowed a new life upon her child. From the moment you were born, you became Leona, my daughter. So please, consider me your mother as well. I hope you will live a long and happy life. In the next life, I hope you will be my daughter again. Even though I was an incompetent mother in this life. I'm sorry. At this point, Leona could no longer hold back her surging emotions. She was the one who should be saying sorry. Why waste her life for a witch like her? She slowly placed her hand on the portrait of her mother. In her previous life, she had been accompanied by nothing but endless exploitation and betrayal. But in this life, she experienced the constant care spoken by her brothers, as well as her royal father's deep affection. This was something she had never experienced in her past life. Mom, I am living very happily now. You don't need to worry about me. The little girl had finally crossed the river of time to meet her mother. As it turned out, her mother had known about her identity as a reincarnated soul all along. Her mother felt nothing but self-blame and guilt. She never blamed Leona for taking the body that originally belonged to her daughter. Instead, she viewed Leona as the one who granted her daughter a new life, simply wishing for Leona to find happiness in this world. At the end of the letter, her mother wrote that she had left Leona an article of clothing, sewn by her own hands. But when Leona opened it, she discovered it was actually a red cloak. However, since it was left behind by her mother, there must be some deeper meaning behind it. Meanwhile, Keith had been waiting outside for a long time. Afraid that something had happened to Leona, she prepared to go inside to check on the situation, but was fiercely repelled by the powerful defensive barrier. Fortunately, Leona walked out right at that moment. Seeing Keith injured, Leona gently blew on her reddened forehead. Are you okay? Keith was too moved to even speak. How could she even care about the pain anymore? But just as the two were preparing to leave, the Emperor hurried over. He was incredibly angry about their trespassing into the forbidden area. After all, Leona's mother was a renowned puppeteer across the continent. There could very well be hidden traps in the room. If they had encountered danger, it would have been a disaster. Therefore, he decided to give Leona a small punishment. But the clever Leona saw right through the Emperor's true thoughts in an instant. She immediately stepped forward to stop the Emperor from leaving. Daddy, you're just worried about me, right? That's why Daddy is so angry. But I only came here because I wanted to see Mommy. She twirled around twice in place as she spoke. Look, Daddy, aren't I perfectly fine? Besides, the injuries I got before have fully healed. The Emperor coughed lightly upon hearing this. As majestic and authoritative as he always was, he was completely defenseless against this daughter of his. Don't run around recklessly in the future, lest you get ambushed by people like last time. Mentioning that incident instantly infuriated Leona all over again. She declared that she absolutely must defeat the first prince and become the emperor of this empire. Why? Because she was afraid that if she failed, she would be dragged off and forced into marriage by the first prince. Hearing this, the emperor's face turned completely black, and his murderous intent began to spread uncontrollably. Are you saying that the first prince spoke to you about marriage? He also said he wanted to have children with me. He said that a child born from the two of us would definitely be incredibly powerful. As soon as those words left her mouth, Keith immediately sprinted off toward the first prince's residence. The emperor was thoroughly enraged as well. His icy killing intent was so intense that even the eaves of the roof began to freeze over. It wasn't until he saw Leona shivering from the cold that he finally began to retract his magic, trying his best to calm himself down. Leona, did you say you want to become the emperor? Leona didn't hide it at all. That's right, I'm going to be the emperor. I'm also going to dominate the entire continent. But I'm still too weak right now. If only I could get stronger faster. The emperor then began imagining what Leona would look like as the emperor. That actually sounds quite interesting. I suppose I'll help you out a little. Follow me, I'll take you to an interesting place. But in the next second, she completely outplayed him. Leona smiled and opened her arms wide toward him. Daddy! The Emperor understood perfectly, thoughtfully picking her up into his arms. I really can't say no to you. Meanwhile, Keith was on her way to the first prince's palace. How could that guy say such things to a 3-year-old child? I absolutely cannot let him live. Unexpectedly, she ran into Harik on the way. Wondering if she should bring this guy along to help, she told Harik the whole story. Sure enough, this successfully triggered Harik's outrage. How could that lunatic do such a thing? But unlike Keith, Harik was still using his brain. He knew that the first prince's side was heavily guarded. If just the two of them went over, it would surely spell disaster. Even if they didn't die, they would be severely injured. But Her Highness the Princess just blew on my injury earlier. Hearing this, Harik's mind was instantly filled with the image of Leona gently blowing on his wounds. What are you standing around like an idiot for? Let's go. We're going to beat the pulp out of that first prince. Remember to keep an eye on me later. I'm going to get myself as injured as possible, so you absolutely have to carry me back. On the other side, the two of them had arrived in front of a massive palace. It had been built by an outstanding alchemist from the previous generation of the royal family, and it housed a vast collection of precious treasures. Seeing this, Leona was too amazed to speak. Daddy, are you giving all of this to me? However, the Emperor told her she could only choose 3 items. Only 3 treasures? Daddy is so stingy. Despite saying that, she still went off to choose her treasures with great excitement. For her, getting 3 treasures was already amazing enough. First, she chose a bracelet for Keith that could resist holy magic, ensuring she would never lose to the first prince's subordinates again. Next, she picked out a magic ring capable of spatial teleportation. With this, she could return to her old hideout from her previous life, where she had stashed away quite a few good things. Watching her, the Emperor couldn't help but sigh in admiration. She has such a good eye for quality at such a young age. In the Emperor's eyes, Leona was choosing treasures specifically to counter the first prince. Therefore, he assumed her third choice would be a treasure related to blizzard magic. However, to his surprise, Leona selected a very inconspicuous necklace. Why did you choose that one? Is Daddy curious? I'm not telling. In the entire empire, she was the only one who dared to speak to him like that. As soon as she returned home, Leona quickly threw herself onto the bed. Another exhausting day. But just as she was getting ready to rest, knocking sounds echoed from outside the palace. It turned out to be Harik. The injuries all over his body were the fruits of his hard labor. Princess, quickly come blow on it for me, I'm dying of pain. Unexpectedly, Keith hurried over as well and stomped her foot right onto his back. Princess, I will take care of him. You should rest quickly. Early the next morning, Leona once again focused her attention on the notebook. In her previous life, she had never once heard her mother's name. Logically speaking, as the Emperor's consort, her mother should have been quite well known. Thus, she decided to read through her mother's diary again, hoping to find the reason hidden within its pages. To her surprise, a magic spell forbidding reading had been placed on the diary. If she wanted to continue reading, she would have to raise her internal mana to tier 6. She didn't understand why her mother would do this. Was she worried that Leona would be in danger? Just then, a cluster of purple magic appeared beside Leona. She knew it was Zero's. His purpose for coming here was to take Leona out for special training. Until now, Leona had only been using her astonishing mana to cast spells. She hadn't properly studied magical theory. As for Zero's, he was a grand mage who had once destroyed half the continent. Receiving his guidance would definitely make her even stronger. Meanwhile, the Emperor was reflecting on the events of the past few days. Every time Leona was in even the slightest danger, he would become incredibly anxious. He would agree to her unreasonable request without hesitation. He had even interfered in the succession battle for her. The Emperor didn't understand why he was acting so completely out of character. Just then, Harik walked in, endlessly complaining about the first prince's wrongdoings while expressing his sympathy for Leona. How could such a small child possibly be a match for that lunatic? He hoped the Emperor would step forward to help. The Emperor, however, deliberately pretended not to care, stating that he would not interfere in the succession disputes again. Unexpectedly, a subordinate reported that Leona and the Master of the Magic Tower had gone to the training grounds. The Emperor could finally hold back no longer. He grabbed Harik and hurried straight to the training grounds. Seeing this, Harik couldn't help but sigh. What a duplicitous man. Meanwhile, Zeros was transferring mana to Leona, attempting to activate the dormant power within her. But in the next second, Leona felt a sharp pain, identical to the pain she had experienced during the priest's blessing. Zeros assumed that Leona simply felt unsafe and suggested moving to a different location for training, such as his room. Those words instantly gave Leona an idea. She summoned a teleportation circle and vanished from the spot. She then appeared in front of a cave. This was her old hideout from her previous life. To her, this was the safest and most comfortable place in the world. Here, her heart could find true peace, allowing her to focus entirely on cultivating her magic. But she had only been training for a short while when a figure appeared behind her. The arrival was none other than Lakis. "Are you lost, little one?" Leona didn't reply. Countless thoughts and memories instantly flooded her mind. Lakis assumed the little girl was simply frightened and prepared to reach out and pick her up. Suddenly, a surge of magic shot out and blocked him. It turned out that Zeros had arrived. He immediately shielded Leona behind him, knowing full well that the man before him was no saint. "Princess, I finally found you. If you don't go back soon, the Emperor is going to wage war on the magic tower." Saying this, he scooped Leona up into his arms. Upon hearing this, Lakis immediately understood Leona's true identity. "Since the Emperor values this child so highly, I absolutely cannot let her leave so easily." Meanwhile, Leona also snapped back to reality. The thought of revenge instantly rushed into her mind. Although she wasn't currently a match for Lakis, she could still deliver some scathing sarcasm. She knew Lakis was extremely confident in his looks, so she relentlessly attacked his appearance, even declaring that Zeros looked 10,000 times better than him. Sure enough, Lakis was highly displeased by these words, but he couldn't exactly stoop to the level of bickering with a child. Zeros, on the other hand, was blushing furiously, his heart practically bursting with joy. "No. If she keeps complimenting me, I won't be able to hold myself back. We need to leave here immediately." He promptly activated teleportation magic, bringing Leona to a grassy plain. From Leona's behavior just now, it wasn't hard to see that she definitely had some sort of past with Lakis. He also knew that Leona's praises were purely meant to mock Lakis. But Leona surely wouldn't easily explain her relationship with him. It was so annoying to think that the first time Leona had acted close to him was all because of that guy. If he had known, he would have beaten the guy up before leaving. On the other side, Lakis wasn't feeling great either. This was the very first time someone had called him ugly. He didn't know why, but that little creature gave him a very familiar feeling. Moreover, why would the Princess of the Empire appear in a place like that? It seemed he needed to make a trip to the Empire to see her. Harik, watching from the side, couldn't help but inwardly complain. He was just pretending not to care before, yet now he had reduced himself to this state. Meanwhile, a completely oblivious Leona was still preoccupied with thoughts of her training. It was Zeros who finally reminded her. "You need to return to the palace immediately. You've been missing for a whole week." Hearing this, Leona was totally confused. Hadn't she just been training for a little while? How could so much time have passed? It looked like she needed to quickly come up with an excuse. Otherwise, she'd be in for a rough time when she got back. Zeros, however, didn't dare delay for even a second. "Do you have any idea how the Emperor has tortured me these past few days?" Those words instantly gave Leona an idea. "It should be fine if I just push all the blame onto you, right?" Zeros looked utterly speechless. "If you want me dead, you can just say so. There's no need to make it this complicated." Having no other choice, Zeros came up with an excuse for her. She had accidentally fallen into the demonic beast forest. Once someone entered that place, they couldn't be tracked by others. Leona thought this was a pretty good idea. "Then let's head back to the palace." On the way back, Leona suddenly remembered that Zeros seemed to have some sort of deal with the Carol Kingdom, so she immediately asked him about it. Seeing that Zeros didn't want to answer, Leona pulled a magic necklace out of her pocket. "I prepared this specifically for you, you know." Seeing this, Zeros found it hard to decline, but he still put forward a condition. Leona had to exchange a secret of her own. It turned out that Zeros once had a younger brother. His brother was a once-in-a-century genius. Even the master of the magic tower had personally visited to invite his brother to join the tower. Zeros, on the other hand, had failed the magic examination twice. Watching the gap between him and his brother grow wider and wider, feelings of inferiority and jealousy inevitably sprouted in Zeros' heart. Ultimately, he abandoned his brother and went out to train alone. After 50 years, he finally reached his ideal level of power. Now he could finally stand proudly in front of his brother, becoming an older brother his sibling could be proud of. Then, to prove his strength, he even took his brother along to challenge a dragon's lair. Not surprisingly, tragedy struck there. Faced with such overwhelming power, they had absolutely no room to fight back. Because of Zeros' arrogance and complacency, his brother never made it out of that cave. It was all because of him that his brother had lost his life. Suddenly, Leona interrupted his thoughts. "You are a genius too. There's no need to be jealous of others. Besides, the dead cannot be resurrected. Even if the King of Carol is incredibly powerful, he cannot do that either." Hearing this, Zeros quickly took 2 steps back. He never expected Leona to actually comfort him. Had it been any other time, he would have thought Leona took the wrong medicine. But he quickly adjusted his emotions and pretended not to care. "Now it's your turn to speak. What is your relationship with the King of Carol? Hearing this, Leona secretly clenched her fists. That guy is someone I must kill no matter what it takes. Zeros couldn't help but ask, do you really have to do that? Leona didn't answer because the answer was an absolute yes. You have no idea what kind of life I've been through. That guy must die. Before Zeros could even reply, Herrick and Keith rushed over. Princess, we finally found you! They didn't notice Zeros standing behind her, whose eyes were welling up with a hint of tears at that moment. Perhaps when that time comes, we will become enemies. In the blink of an eye, Leona had returned to the palace. At this moment, the entire palace was shrouded in dead silence, the atmosphere incredibly solemn. Leona, where have you been these past few days? Hearing this, Leona immediately acted cute. Daddy, long time no see. I used the long-distance teleportation magic wrong and accidentally fell into the demonic beast forest. I barely managed to make it out. I'm sorry, Daddy, I made you worry. The Emperor picked her up by the collar in one swift motion. To be able to walk out of the demonic beast forest at such a young age, she truly was the daughter he favored. After thoroughly checking to ensure Leona was uninjured, he abruptly tossed her onto the ground. You are grounded for a week. Let's see if you dare run around recklessly again. Although Leona felt it was a bit excessive, she didn't dare raise any objections, as the Emperor was still furious. After Leona left, the Emperor immediately summoned the royal family's top mage. He ordered a barrier to be cast over the entire palace grounds, forbidding anyone from using long-distance teleportation. Hearing this, the mage quickly warned, Your Majesty, this action could completely drain the national treasury. But the Emperor didn't care in the slightest. Hurry up and get to it. If anything happens to the princess again, I'll butcher you, old man, and feed you to the pigs. Meanwhile, Leona was bored out of her mind. Being grounded for a week, what was she supposed to do? Just then, Keith walked in carrying a gift box. She said it was a gift from the second prince, Ebek, along with a letter. It turned out that even though Ebek was in the Carl kingdom, he had constantly been observing Leona's movements. After learning of Leona's disappearance, he had intended to rush back immediately. However, he had promised Leona that he would investigate matters in the Carl kingdom for her. Now, he had successfully infiltrated a mercenary group within the Carol kingdom and promised not to let her down. After reading the letter, Leona was quite moved. Let's see what gift you sent then. It might be some great treasure. But when she opened the box, she discovered it was actually the severed head of the mercenary group's commander. The little girl never imagined that the gift her brother had sent from thousands of miles away would be a decapitated head. It turned out her brother truly was a certified lunatic who enjoyed collecting human body parts. The moment Leona opened the gift, she was genuinely terrified. Even after a whole night had passed, she still hadn't recovered from the shock. Right then, Nicole came to her door in high spirits, wanting to play with Leona. But Leona sharply noticed the bruises on his face. Did you get beaten up? Hearing this, Nicole quickly lied, claiming he had accidentally hurt himself while practicing magic. Little did she know, the true culprit behind these injuries was the first prince. It turned out that during the few days Leona was missing, the first prince had found Nicole. He knew that Nicole and Leona were on good terms, so he immediately harbored murderous intent toward him. Don't worry, Ibek will soon come to keep you company. As for the Leona you care so much about, I will save her for last. Fortunately, the sixth princess, Sherry, stepped in, allowing him to narrowly escape with his life. At that moment, Leona reached out and interrupted his thoughts. Her tiny hand was enveloped in gentle magic, slowly healing his injuries. Nicole was moved beyond words. I'm going to tell Harik about this and totally show off to him. Leona froze. It looked like she needed to quickly shut her doors, or else she was going to be annoyed to death. But not long after, a bald man came knocking. He was Adai, the fourth sage of the Ivory Tower, ordered to come and tutor Leona. Adai was 10,000 times unwilling to do this. What kind of books could a 3-year-old brat possibly understand? So he prepared to put Leona in her place right from the start. Little did he know, Leona had the exact same thought. She absolutely had to chase this annoying teacher away. He pulled a few books out of his bag. I heard Her Highness the Princess loves to read. Let me test you then. Who would have thought that Leona just glanced at the title and then recited the entire book word for word? The bald man was so shocked that if he had any hair left, it would have fallen out on the spot. Next, from history to physics, and even to mathematics, Leona answered every single question fluently. It made the bald man question his very existence. How could a 3-year-old child possibly know so much? Did she start studying while still in the womb? Leona was getting tired of being interrogated. To think they sent someone like this to teach me. It's so infuriating. Hearing this, the bald man's eyes widened and he slammed a book onto the table. Then, his face full of confidence, he declared, If you can understand this book, I will absolutely never bother you again. Furthermore, starting tomorrow, I'll wash my hair while doing a handstand. Leona stared intently at the book and discovered that its cover was actually made of human skin. That meant this book most likely originated from the demon realm. And to this day, the language of the demon realm had yet to be fully deciphered. No wonder the bald man was so confident. But what he didn't know was that Leona had been a great witch in her previous life. Reading this was an absolute piece of cake for her. How about we bet on something a bit more practical? At that moment, the bald man was still in a fit of anger. If you can understand this book by tomorrow, I'll give you 10,000 gold coins immediately. Leona soon headed to the library. She had to put on an act at least, otherwise it would arouse suspicion. Unexpectedly, she bumped into Zeros there. Zeros was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected Her Highness the Princess to enjoy reading. Leona then proceeded to tell him everything about her bet with the bald man in full detail. Zeros recognized it as a book from the demon realm at a single glance. That guy went way too far. Do you need me to go beat him up for you? However, Leona didn't seem to care at all. I'm a little genius after all. How could I possibly not understand this book? Hearing this, Zeros stood stunned for quite a while. For so many years, he had practically lived in the library just to study the script of the demon realm. Upon coming back to his senses, he suddenly bowed to Leona, begging her to teach him the demonic script. Leona rejected him without a second thought. She knew Zeros wanted to save his brother, but the dead cannot be brought back to life. That was an unchangeable fact. Zeros instantly fell silent, his usual playful and smiling demeanor completely vanishing. You haven't experienced what I have, so you shouldn't say things like that so casually. You simply do not understand the pain in my heart. Suddenly, Leona kicked him hard. And how much do you know about me? Since you know about the soul inside my body, you should also know that what I've experienced is far more than what you see now. Do you think I've lived this long without having people I wanted to bring back to life? But I wouldn't make the same choice you did, and I don't want to understand your mindset either. In the end, the two parted on very bad terms. Although Leona won her bet against the bald man just as she had hoped, she couldn't bring herself to feel happy at the moment. Afterward, she made a demand of the bald man. She wanted the Grand Sage to be her teacher. Rumor had it that the Grand Sage's knowledge far exceeded that of ordinary people. When the time came, she was determined to ask him clearly on Zeros' behalf whether the dead could truly be brought back to life. Meanwhile, the first prince had tracked down Nicole once again. You got lucky and escaped last time, but this time will be different. As soon as he spoke, he summoned several swords of white light and launched them straight at Nicole. In the nick of time, Leona finally arrived. You are so dead! She finally made her move. To save Nicole from his crisis, Leona finally decided to strike against the first prince. The fireballs she summoned rained down from the sky, successfully separating the two of them. Leona's face was completely written with rage, so it was because of him that Nicole got hurt. Just as she finished speaking, she used her magic to hurl massive boulders directly at the first prince. However, magic of this level was nothing to the first prince. With a casual swing of his longsword, he easily deflected all the incoming boulders. Leona, I haven't seen you for just a few days, yet you've grown quite a bit stronger again. Although Leona excelled at offensive magic, the battlefield was now covered in thick smoke, making it completely impossible to lock onto the first prince's position. Before Leona could make her next move, the first prince used the smoke as cover and appeared right in front of her, sword drawn. At this distance, you can't dodge my sword. Little did he know, Leona had a trick up her sleeve as well, the necklace imbued with spatial magic. In the next moment, a spatial magic circle suddenly materialized behind the first prince. And surging out of that circle were the very fireballs Leona had summoned earlier. I'm returning those words right back at you. At this distance, you can't dodge this. Just as expected, the first prince was blasted away over 300 meters by the fireballs. But just as Leona was getting ready to beat him to a pulp, the first prince's sword rushed over. What the sword hadn't anticipated was that Keith had already been waiting for him there for a long time. Armed with the treasure Leona had given her, Keith was completely confident she could win. In the next moment, Keith summoned a colossal magma beast entirely wreathed in flames. With just a casual strike, it battered the first prince's sword so badly he couldn't even crawl back up. Meanwhile, the emperor was watching the entire battle from afar, taking it all in. This also made him realize Leona's true intention when she had selected that necklace earlier. The little one is truly amazing. It seems I won't have to worry about her anymore. Unluckily for the emperor, the subconscious smile that graced his lips was caught by the perceptive Herrick. As expected, your majesty is also feeling proud of Her Highness the Princess, aren't you? Hearing this, the emperor's cheeks flushed slightly red, and he quickly coughed a few times. Did I make a proud expression? The battle on their end ultimately concluded with Leona's victory. Your Majesty, Her Highness the Princess won. She's truly amazing. On the surface, the emperor remained entirely unfazed, telling Harik not to make a fuss over nothing, but in his heart, he was already blooming with joy. Just then, Harik handed the emperor a letter saying it was sent by the king of Carol. To his surprise, the emperor merely gave it a casual glance before instantly incinerating it. What kind of low-tier trash is he, daring to write a letter to me? At the same time, the first prince's face was ashen. In the succession wars, those who lost only ever faced one fate. Just kill me. However, Leona was already used to this by now. I just wanted to beat you up. I didn't want to kill you. She then reached out her chubby little hand. If you don't want to get beaten up anymore, then come be my subordinate. The first prince was somewhat taken aback. He hadn't expected to actually survive. He then stumbled and slowly stood up. Are you sure you want to keep such a dangerous person like me by your side? But Leona acted as if she hadn't even heard him, simply muttering to herself, Nikal is number 100. Ebek is number 11, so you… Hearing this, a faint smile appeared on the corners of the first prince's mouth. How truly interesting. He then grasped Leona's tiny hand. In that case, I will be number 100. I will help you recruit your remaining 97 subordinates. In the blink of an eye, 2.5 days passed. Nikal woke up with a start, only to find that the injuries on his body had almost completely healed. And the person who had been taking care of him during this time was, naturally, Leona. Didn't I tell you to let me know whenever anything happened? Why didn't you say a word when you were getting beaten up? But Nikal felt it was too embarrassing. What kind of brother ran to his little sister after getting beaten up? Leona, however, believed that since they were a family, they should naturally help each other. Furthermore, it was only right and proper for a master to protect her subordinates. Hearing this, Nikal was so moved that tears streamed down his face. He abruptly pulled Leona into a tight embrace. Thank you, Leona. In truth, Leona didn't know why she had said those words either. She just felt a strange sensation in her heart. Her understanding of the concept of family was still very vague. Just then, Harik barged in, immediately showering Leona with endless, over-the-top praises. Following closely behind him was His Majesty the Emperor. The very first thing he did upon entering was scoop Leona up into his arms. But when the words of praise reached his lips, he simply couldn't bring himself to say them. Instead, he warned Leona to be careful from now on. The news of her defeating the first prince had already spread. This meant that the nobles who originally followed the first prince would very likely try to switch their allegiance to Leona. However, Leona currently had the least political power among all the princes and princesses, making her highly susceptible to being manipulated by others. But Leona paid it no mind. She stated that she had Harik and Keith. The first prince, Rodri, had also become her subordinate, along with Ebek and Nikal. Even the bald man who had come to teach her earlier had declared his intent to follow in her footsteps. Hearing this, the emperor was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected Leona to actually tame that arrogant bald man. It seems my daughter has truly grown up. But later that evening, on their way back to the palace, Keith took advantage of the empty surroundings to ask Leona a question. Princess, is your soul different from others? Oh no, oh no! Keith had actually discovered Leona's identity as a reincarnated soul. And her question instantly jolted an incredibly sleepy Leona wide awake. Princess, is your soul different from others? It turned out that on the day Leona and Zeros had that massive argument in the library, their conversation was accidentally overheard by Keith outside the door. Keith harbored no malicious intent in asking this question. She was a necromancer herself, so her perception of souls far exceeded that of ordinary people. Therefore, she had always known that Leona was different. I'm sorry, Princess, I eavesdropped on your conversation. Upon hearing this, Leona's eyes instantly welled up with tears. She was the one who should be saying sorry. In Leona's eyes, whether it was Keith, the maid Ling, or Nikal and the others, they were all a family. And there shouldn't be secrets among family members. But despite this, Leona continually pleaded with Keith, begging her not to tell anyone else. Because she was afraid. Afraid that once everyone learned her true identity, they would abandon her. This time, she had finally obtained a family that cared for her and cherished her. She never wanted to experience that feeling of utter loneliness ever again. Hearing this, Keith gently patted Leona's head. You must have suffered so much, right? Everything is fine now, you've already told me. Please believe me, I will always stand by your side. Everyone will love you. Keith's words deeply touched Leona, yet they couldn't entirely erase the fear rooted deep in her bones. Even if I say I am a witch, you would still stand by my side? Keith's answer was a resounding yes. To her, Leona was just Leona, the person she had to protect no matter what. Hearing these words, Leona finally untied the knot in her heart toward Keith. She began to tell Keith about her past. From wandering the streets all alone, to being tricked into becoming an experimental subject, and then becoming the one and only Great Witch. followed by meeting Lacus, being ruthlessly betrayed, and ultimately murdered by him. Throughout that entire lifetime, she was either living in complete isolation or being used and betrayed by others. It wasn't until she came to this world and met everyone that Leona began to try trusting others again. As she spoke, she abruptly threw her arms around Keith. "It's all of you who allowed me to experience the warmth of a family. I am truly happy right now." Keith was also deeply moved by Leona's words. Although she was clumsy with words and couldn't offer any comforting phrases, she had already secretly sworn in her heart to slaughter the guy who had broken Leona's heart. She then promised Leona with a deadly serious expression that she would absolutely never tell anyone else about this. But upon further thought, she realized something wasn't quite right. Why should that guy Zeros get to monopolize Her Highness's secret all to himself? I definitely need to pick a fight with him someday. Leona was completely bewildered. Why did she suddenly bring that guy up out of nowhere? After that, Leona became visibly much happier. Spilling the secrets hidden in her heart truly made her feel much lighter. Likewise, Keith wore a smile on her face every single day. She was now one of the rare few who knew the princess's deepest secret. However, Leona was currently the most dazzling existence in the palace. Countless people came to visit her every single day, leaving her utterly exhausted. It was at this time that the sixth princess, Sherry, also came knocking. But the moment she walked through the door, Keith pressed a dagger against her neck, as Keith was unaware of her identity. Unexpectedly, Sherry simply pushed the dagger away with extreme calm. "Your sword is quite impressive." She then revealed her identity, stating that she had come specifically to play with Leona. But Leona stated that she was very busy. "If you want to see me, you need to make an appointment in advance." Besides, today's appointment slots were already almost entirely filled up by those other guys. But to Leona's surprise, Sherry actually started throwing a tantrum right there in public, refusing to leave no matter what. "Hey, aren't you older than me? Why are you doing something only a little brat would do?" Sherry didn't care about any of that, though. "I heard you're really amazing. You not only saved Nicole but also defeated the first prince?" Those words instantly struck a chord in Leona's heart. "Of course, I'm the best there is." Hearing this, Sherry revealed a wicked smile. "I truly hope that's the case." After a busy day, Leona collapsed onto her bed, completely exhausted. She had planned to take a good rest, but just then, a maid walked over. She warned Leona to be careful around the sixth princess, Sherry, because she was highly likely in league with the eighth prince, Eid. Furthermore, there were still many princes and princesses she hadn't even met yet. Princess Leona is currently the center of attention. You should maintain your vigilance at all times. After pondering for a moment, Leona felt her words made sense and promised to be careful. Seeing this, the maid was deeply moved. It was incredibly rare for Leona to actually listen to her advice. So she began to gently remind Leona again, "You mustn't get hurt, okay? You must grow up happily. We will forever guard your side and forever love you." An incredibly brilliant sage had actually acknowledged a 3-year-old girl as his teacher. Because of this, he squatted in front of Leona's door every single day, begging for her to teach him just one lesson. Several nobles couldn't understand it at all. A little brat was actually making the fourth sage wait for her? But this only earned them the bald man's wrath. In his heart, Leona was the greatest scholar in existence, and most importantly, she was his teacher. If it weren't for the fact that Leona was an heir to the throne, he would have invited her to the Tower of Wisdom long ago. Therefore, if any of you ignorant little brats dare to speak disrespectfully to my teacher again, don't blame me for showing no mercy. Meanwhile, Leona was wandering around the palace when she happened to run into the emperor and his entourage. She immediately noticed Zeros standing off to the side. "Why haven't you come to see me these past few days?" Zeros was stunned. He hadn't expected Leona to have been waiting for him all this time. But in the next second, Leona grabbed him by the ear. "Let's have a private chat." Seeing this, the emperor secretly clenched his fists. She hadn't even greeted him before getting dragged away by Zeros. "From today onward, I am banning the master of the magic tower from entering the palace." In the blink of an eye, Leona and Zeros arrived at the library. Leona said sheepishly, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have lost my temper with you the other day." In truth, Zeros hadn't felt good about it either. He clearly didn't understand Leona's past, so he shouldn't have said those words back then. Moreover, at his age, he was actually making a little girl take the initiative to apologize. He truly was as foolish as ever. Just as Zeros was about to voice his own apology, Leona interrupted him. Keith found out about my soul. She overheard our conversation in the library." Hearing this, Zeros' head started buzzing. It was all his fault for causing so much trouble. Now it was no longer a secret solely between him and Leona. Just as he finished his thought, Leona grabbed a handful of his hair. "Seriously, can't you be a bit more normal?" "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I really misspoke that day." Hearing this, Leona suddenly felt a surge of doubt. Then will you cut ties with Lacus? Naturally, Zeros refused. He simply couldn't let go of his obsession with his brother that easily. Upon receiving his answer, Leona didn't throw a tantrum like last time. Instead, she warned Zeros to be extremely careful, because Lacus was far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. Hearing these words, Zeros stood stunned for quite a while. To keep Leona from worrying, he once again put on a nonchalant facade. I'm the master of the magic tower, you know. Of course I'll take proper precautions. When Leona returned to her palace, she discovered that a long line had already formed inside. They were all there to see her. Her Highness is currently very exhausted and strongly requests to rest. However, just as the group was arguing over who got to spend time with Leona, the first prince, Rodri, pushed open the door and walked in. His arrival instantly plunged the room into a dead silence. I have something to say to Leona. You all better disappear right now. Hearing this, Sherry and Nicole wanted to retort, but Rodri was already beginning to cast a spell. Since you don't want to leave, let me help you. Leona glared at him. Are you going to start a fight in my palace? Who would have thought that the magic in Rodri's hand would instantly transform into a single flower? Of course I wouldn't be so impolite, I just wanted to give you this. However, while Leona was still distracted, his expression turned icy cold once again. Are you still not leaving? Given the first prince's terrifying strength, the others had no choice but to tactfully take their leave. Rodri's purpose for coming this time was still to secure a marriage agreement with Leona. Although he was now Leona's subordinate, his heart hadn't changed in the slightest. Especially after being defeated by Leona, his determination to marry her had only grown stronger. Leona looked completely speechless. This guy and Zeros would definitely get along famously. I am not going to marry you. I'm going to become the emperor. Rodri wasn't disheartened by Leona's rejection. He would have plenty of opportunities later anyway. As he was leaving, he warned Leona to be extremely careful of the sixth princess, Sherry. She isn't as innocent and harmless as she appears on the surface. Leona was a bit confused. Why was everyone telling her to be careful of Sherry? Was she really that powerful? Just then, a maid rushed over in a panic. Princess, have you been in the palace this entire time? Receiving Leona's affirmative answer, her face was filled with question marks. Then who was that person in the garden just now? When Keith saw Leona, she also broke out in a cold sweat. Princess, weren't you just eating with me in the dining hall? Why have you been in your palace this whole time? Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. Leona's personality had actually undergone a drastic change overnight. Not only did she throw away the flowers Nicole had painstakingly prepared right to his face, but she also slapped her maid without a single word of explanation. As it turned out, while Leona and the others were discussing the strange events of the past few days inside her palace, nobles outside had spotted Leona in the garden. They had originally intended to go up and curry favor with her, but to their surprise, the moment they stepped forward to greet her, Leona burst into tears and frantically ran away. Seeing this, the nobles were completely bewildered. Didn't they say Her Highness the Princess was incredibly powerful? Why is she acting like a 3-year-old brat? They immediately decided to report this incident to the 4th Imperial Consort. They were certain she would be thrilled to hear about it. Upon hearing the news, Harik was also extremely surprised. How could Her Highness the Princess possibly cry over something so trivial? He quickly sought out Leona to verify whether the garden incident was true. If those nobles bullied you, I'll go pay them a visit one by one right now. Unexpectedly, Leona said she had stayed in her room all day and hadn't gone out at all. Don't tell me you saw a ghost. Seeing this, Harik burst into tears in a very cooperative manner. But before leaving, he still reminded Leona to notify them immediately if she discovered anything unusual. After Harik left, Leona began to recall the bizarre incidents that had occurred over the past few days, and a few clues began to form in her mind. Meanwhile, Nicole had already prepared a bouquet of flowers to give to Leona. He had gone out early in the morning just to pick them. He was certain his little rabbit would love them. But as soon as he stepped out of his palace, he saw someone who completely astonished him. It was Leona, loudly berating a maid and continuously slapping her face. She then walked toward Nicole with a highly impatient expression. Are the flowers in your hand for me? Before Nicole could even reply, she snatched the flowers, threw them all onto the ground, and began trampling them relentlessly. Only an idiot would like these things. Stay away from me, and don't ever bother me again. The next victim was Harik. Without a word, she summoned a flaming arrow and shot it straight at him. I really hate you, you know. I could even list 100 reasons why I despise you. At that moment, Harik was overwhelmed with a myriad of emotions, standing frozen in place, completely at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Leona had also sought out her maid, Lynn. Faced with the maid's usual warm greetings and inquiries about her well-being, her response was, "Who do you think you are? Is it your place to order me around? A mere wet nurse actually dares to act so boldly." The maid stared back with a look of utter bewilderment. At the same time, in a certain room elsewhere, the sixth princess, Sherry, revealed a satisfied smile. "That's it. Let the people around you leave you one by one. When that happens, I'll be able to absorb your power, and then kill you." But to her surprise, the maid abruptly grabbed Leona's wrist. "You are not Her Highness the Princess." "Exactly are you?" Seeing this, the fake Leona instantly panicked and hastily broke free. Before the maid could make another move, she quickly fled the scene. The maid then frantically searched the palace for the real Leona. Finally, inside the library, she found Leona and her usual entourage. Before the maid could even speak, Leona asked the first question. "Lynn, did I do something to you today?" It turned out that the real Leona had already learned of everything by now. After the maid recounted the entire sequence of events, the atmosphere in the library instantly plummeted to freezing. "She actually dared to lay a hand on my family. Wait for me here. I have something to take care of." Meanwhile, Sherry was still wondering how the maid had managed to see through the disguise. Suddenly, a stone flew from behind and struck her squarely on the head. She instinctively turned around, only to discover that Leona had somehow entered her room unnoticed. "I originally didn't plan to lower myself to your level, but you should never have targeted the people around me." As soon as she finished speaking, she summoned several magical orbs of light and fired them directly at Sherry. In an instant, a massive explosion echoed throughout the entire room. By now, Sherry had been blasted beyond recognition. Yet surprisingly, she still tried to play dumb, asking Leona why she was attacking her. "I don't care if you try to make me a laughingstock, but you should never have provoked the people around me. They are my family. I am the only one allowed to bully them." Hearing this, Sherry dropped the act as well. "Didn't you say you wanted to be emperor? That is a path destined for loneliness. One day, they might just become a burden to you. If someone ever used their lives to threaten you, demanding a life for a life, what would you do?" Leona stood stunned. It was a question she had never considered. But she quickly found the answer. And that answer was to become stronger. So strong that she could stop anything like that from ever happening. The reason you would ask a question like this is simply because you are too weak to protect your own people. Tears instantly filled Sherry's eyes. Those words seemed to have pierced straight into the deepest depths of her heart. Her expression immediately darkened, and she summoned a black magic circle, instantly binding Leona in place. This was a powerful spell her mother had entrusted to her. She believed that with Leona's current capabilities, she would never be able to break free. Leona also knew very well in her heart that if she wanted to break free from this binding, she would have to use all of her strength. But if she did that, the entire palace would likely be destroyed, and Sherry would die. Just as Leona was about to be completely swallowed by the darkness, a sudden hurricane swept through the entire room. Then a pair of large hands appeared and tightly grabbed Leona. It turned out to be Zero's. "Princess, I kept our promise this time. I finally arrived in time." He made it. Zero's had finally arrived just in the nick of time, saving Leona from the brink of death. "This time I kept my promise to you and didn't let you get hurt." But all this earned him was a swift karate chop to the head from Leona. "I was trapped for so long before you showed up, and you still have the nerve to act cool?" Although Leona's strike was a bit heavy, Zero's didn't mind. "By the way, what do you plan to do with this thing?" Leona looked confused. "What thing?" "Her, of course. How about I just kill her for you?" Leona finally realized what he meant. She had almost forgotten the main issue at hand. She needed to handle this matter personally. To her surprise, Sherry spoke up first. "If the master of the magic tower hadn't saved you, you would have died by my hands long ago." Leona chose not to hide the truth. "If I had used my full strength, I could have easily broken free from the binding. It's just that if I did, you would very likely have lost your life, Sherry." Naturally, Sherry didn't believe her. That was a powerful spell given to her by her mother. But in the next second, Leona simply snapped her fingers lightly, instantly summoning the exact same magic as before to bind Sherry in place. Sherry's face was filled with shock. "How is this possible? This kind of magic can be easily copied. So if you want to protect the people around you, you must make yourself stronger." Leona's words were like a knife stabbing deep into Sherry's heart, because they made her think of her own mother. Was it because she was too weak that she didn't dare to stay with her mother? Because she was afraid her mother would become her weakness, she lacked even the courage to meet her. But she just didn't want her mother to get hurt. In this ruthless war for succession, family members would only become tools for others to use against her. Because of this, she desperately wanted to see her mother again, to live with her. Tears continuously streamed down Sherry's cheeks. At this moment, she no longer put up any resistance, allowing the darkness to swallow her whole. She admitted her own cowardice, only wishing that, in her next life, she wouldn't be born into the royal family. Unexpectedly, Leona suddenly grabbed her arm and forcefully yanked her out of the darkness. Why aren't you fighting back? Do you want to die that badly? Listen well, I am going to become the emperor. But I will not kill you, nor will I ever be despicable enough to use your mother as leverage to threaten you. If you want to see your mother, go find her immediately. I will guarantee her safety. In truth, Leona envied Sherry. At least she still had her mother. Leona had lived 2 lifetimes, yet she had never truly met her mother face to face. Hearing these words, Sherry finally broke down and cried loudly. In her heart, she silently resolved to bring her mother over tomorrow and protect her well. She then grabbed Leona by the collar. Why are you being so nice?
I really hate you. Seeing this, Zeros was also somewhat surprised. Princess, you seem to be getting kinder and kinder.
Leona didn't deny it. She was no longer the great witch of the past. She now had family and friends. In this life, she could finally live happily like a normal person. Zeros didn't respond, simply wishing that Leona's hopes would be fulfilled. He then prepared to bid her farewell. He needed to make preparations before the King of Carol arrived in the Empire. Leona's eyes instantly darkened. Who did you say was coming? You heard right. The King of Carol, Lakis, is coming to visit the Empire. Upon learning this news, Leona immediately sought out the Emperor. Daddy, can you let me meet the King of Carol? At first, the Emperor intended to refuse, but after Leona's relentless pestering and pleading, he finally agreed. Leona happily threw herself into the Emperor's arms. Thank you, Daddy. This time you won't escape from my grasp so easily. Early the next morning, Leona and Keith were taking a stroll in the garden when Sherry came looking for her. And standing right behind Sherry was her mother. This time she had specially prepared a gift for Leona as an apology for impersonating her the other day. But with Ibex's previous gift fresh in her mind, Leona suddenly felt a wave of inexplicable unease. Sherry instantly saw through her inner thoughts. It's nothing strange, just open it and see. I'm not giving this to you because I like you, you know. We're still rivals from now on. But the moment Leona unwrapped the gift, she froze completely. The little doll Sherry had given her looked exactly like her mother. In that instant, all the longing for her mother hidden deep in her heart came pouring out. She truly, desperately wanted to see her mother just once. Thank you, Sherry. This entire scene was observed by the Emperor from afar. The moment he saw Leona's sorrowful expression, the Emperor's heart ached just as much. At that moment, he finally understood why he had done all those incomprehensible things for Leona before. It turned out he had always loved this child deep in his heart. With a flash, he appeared by her side and tightly grasped Leona's tiny hand. He then swept her into his arms. Leona, don't make that sad expression anymore. I want you to always be happy. It was then that Leona snapped back to reality. She still had her daddy and everyone else who cared for her. Daddy, you're the best. So moving, truly moving. The Emperor had finally understood his own true feelings. In the eyes of others, he was a cold-faced killer who had slaughtered 37 of his siblings to ascend the throne, a man completely indifferent to all of his children. It wasn't until Leona appeared that he smiled at his own child for the very first time. It was the first time he had ever interfered in the succession war. And it was the first time he felt genuine heartache from seeing his child sad. Although he was far from a competent father, the only thing he wanted to do in this moment was to protect Leona's safety. I truly hope this child can stay happy forever. He then asked Leona, do you still want to become the emperor? Leona's answer was an absolute yes. Only by becoming emperor could she fulfill her revenge plan. The emperor reminded her that this path was destined to be fraught with danger. Leona naturally understood this, which was why she intended to become even stronger. Furthermore, even if she did become emperor, she would never kill her other siblings. From now on, no one in the royal family would have to die. You are still young? You will understand when you grow up. To become emperor, personal strength isn't enough. You also need the backing of numerous powerful factions. Then I'll just work until those nobles support me. Besides, if I ever truly face danger, Daddy would come protect me immediately, wouldn't you? Hearing this, the emperor smiled. Naturally. If Leona really did become the emperor, perhaps all the children could survive until adulthood and safely leave the palace. Just then, the emperor's gaze fell upon the small doll in Leona's hands. He instantly recognized it as Leona's mother. This inevitably brought his own wife to mind. Leona, what was written in the notebook your mother left behind? Hearing this, Leona trembled all over. She absolutely could not tell her daddy about the secrets of her soul. If she did, it was highly likely she would lose him. So she stammered out, Mommy said she would give me a family and let me live happily. She said she loved me very much. I love Mommy too, even though I've never met her. Hearing this, the emperor's heart remained turbulent for a long time. Why hadn't his name been mentioned even once in that diary? Opera had often said the emperor was the strongest, yet she had never once said she loved him. Leona, I have matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. Meanwhile, Rodri was discussing matters with some nobles when Leona suddenly burst in. Before he could even greet her, Leona demanded to know why he hadn't told her about the King of Karl visiting the Empire. Seeing this, the surrounding nobles were instantly shocked. Daring to speak to the first prince in such a tone, did she think she had lived too long? But in the next second, Rodri simply pulled Leona into a hug. "I'm sorry, I've been so busy lately that I completely forgot." He then proceeded to introduce the identities of the nearby nobles to Leona one by one. Leona had grown impatient long ago and was about to leave directly. However, she suddenly remembered what her maid had told her. She must always act amiable and endearing when meeting nobles. Thus, Leona took a deep breath and put on an incredibly cute facade.
Hello everyone, my name is Leona.
This single action instantly left everyone present utterly enchanted. They couldn't believe such an adorable life form existed on this earth. But the moment those nobles left, she immediately reverted to her true colors. "Daddy told you to bring me along when you meet the King of Karl. Got it?" Her words instantly sparked Rodri's curiosity. "What's wrong? Do you not like the Karl kingdom?" "Of course. I despise that kingdom to death. I dream about destroying it." Hearing this, the first prince immediately perked up. "Then how about I help you destroy the Karl kingdom and you marry me?" The day of the banquet arrived quickly. Lacus sat entirely alone in a corner. He was extremely displeased at the moment. How dare these blind fools neglect him? So what if he was the strongest magic swordsman on the continent? So what if it was the emperor of the Hades Empire? Once he conquered the entire continent in the future, he would definitely repay today's humiliation 100-fold. His thoughts then drifted to Leona. He had long heard that Leona was a descendant of dragons, a genius who had broken through the third tier of magic at merely 3 years old. But a child like that should be very easy to fool, right? He then found Leona, putting on a gentlemanly facade to greet her. Knowing his true nature all too well, Leona remained completely indifferent. Seeing this, Lacus immediately leaned in close and whispered a threat. It would be best to keep the fact that we met last time a secret. Little did he know, he had just walked right into Leona's trap. Leona loudly declared, "That was only because I got lost in the demonic beast forest and happened to run into you. Plus, I remember you calling yourself an emperor back then." This single sentence instantly sparked a wave of murmurs among the surrounding nobles. A puny king of Karl actually dares to call himself an emperor? Seeing this, Lacus hastily tried to explain, claiming that Leona must have misheard. His expression then turned chillingly cold. "How could I dare say such a thing? Wouldn't you agree, princess?" The killing intent Lacus released instantly frightened Leona, causing her to stagger backward. But she was no pushover either. Leona quickly threw herself into the emperor's arms. "Daddy, I'm so scared. That man is so weird. He keeps trying to get close to me." Hearing this, the emperor immediately stood up, an icy aura instantly sweeping across the entire hall. "Lacus Karel, what business do you have with the princess?" This terrifying power genuinely startled Lacus, and he hurriedly bowed to apologize, stating that the person he actually wanted to speak to was the emperor. The emperor slowly placed Leona down on the ground. "Then I'd like to hear it. What business do you have with me?" But what Lacus said next completely dropped Leona's jaw. "In order to consolidate the alliance between the Karl kingdom and the Empire, I humbly request that you allow my child to marry the 12th princess." They made their move. They finally made their move. To prevent Leona from being married off to the Karl kingdom, both the first brother and the fourth brother drew their swords, ready to teach this self-righteous Lacus a lesson. The emperor today was no longer the cold-blooded and ruthless man of the past. This time he intended to protect not just Leona, but all of his children. This all happened because Lacus had submitted a request to the emperor, asking him to marry Leona off to his child. The condition was yielding the mining rights of the southern Kuria Mountains to the empire. The Kuria Mountains could continuously yield precious gems, which would further solidify the alliance between the two nations. But before the emperor could even respond, Nicole and Rodri stepped forward first. "Are you joking? Did you even ask for Leona's opinion?" "Exactly. Did you even ask for my opinion? Leona is going to marry me in the future." "Hey, can you stop talking nonsense on an occasion like this?" Rodri didn't understand what was wrong. "I'm being completely sincere here." Unexpectedly, Lacus simply snapped his fingers lightly, instantly neutralizing all the magical energy the two of them had gathered. "I advise you both, do not casually display your power in front of someone stronger." Harik couldn't stand it anymore. Why hadn't His Majesty the Emperor intervened yet? Was he just going to let that guy continue acting so arrogantly in front of Her Highness the Princess? Little did he know Lacus's actions just now had already given the Emperor more than enough reason to strike. In the very next moment, a terrifying surge of ice magic instantly permeated the air. "Lacus Karel, you are far too arrogant. Do you actually dare to attack my children right in front of me?" Hearing this, both Rodri and Nicole looked utterly astonished. This was the first time their royal father had ever referred to them as his children. Standing to the side, Lacus tried to speak up and defend himself, but the ice magic had already spread across his entire body, rendering him completely immobile. Get the hell back to Carol immediately. This is my final act of mercy toward you. All of this was observed by a mysterious man in the distance. It seems there's nothing else going on here. I can take my leave. At that moment, Leona came looking for Zeros. With an incredibly serious expression, Leona asked when exactly Lacus had gotten married. Zeros thought about it carefully. About 5 years ago, I believe, I heard it was a magnificent wedding. He didn't notice that Leona had secretly clenched her fists. 5 years ago, that meant shortly after she died, Lacus had married another woman. So was that why he couldn't wait to kill her? At this moment, Leona found it nearly impossible to suppress the blazing fury in her heart. She was determined to slice that guy into 1,000 pieces. It seemed Zeros had also noticed this, though he didn't understand why Leona was so intensely angry. Leona, meanwhile, began to mentally review Lacus's actions today. Why would Lacus propose that she marry his son? Moreover, the look in his eyes at that moment was exactly the same as the look in his eyes when he killed her back then. Could Lacus have already begun to suspect her identity? Leona didn't understand where she could have slipped up and revealed herself, but she quickly found her answer. The last time she went missing, she had inexplicably bumped into Lacus. Come to think of it, that guy must have definitely tampered with her old hideout. So she turned to look at Zeros. Can you keep a secret tight? Of course, last time I fell into the water and almost drowned, I didn't even yell for help. Although Zeros' playful, grinning demeanor didn't make Leona feel he was entirely reliable, she currently had no other options. Come with me to a place. In the blink of an eye, the two arrived inside Leona's residence from her previous life. Some sort of special magic must have been planted here. Just as Leona was about to ask Zeros for his help, she discovered that Zeros had already fallen to his knees. Princess, to think you are actually a witch. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Nicole and Rodri both wore incredibly solemn expressions. They couldn't understand why His Majesty had called them my children. Was his brain broken? Unexpectedly, Harik suddenly popped up. As you can see, His Majesty today has completely changed. Hearing this, both of them looked bewildered. Why would he be like this? He has absolutely no reason to change. You should thank Her Highness the Princess. It was she who awakened His Majesty's paternal love. Although the two didn't respond, the expressions on their faces said it all. This feeling is truly so strange. I've heard Leona calling him Daddy all this time. Can I call him that too? But Rodri, standing nearby, shot the idea down. Wouldn't that be a bit too awkward? We should just call him Father. Little did they know, the Emperor had heard their entire conversation. The two of them were instantly terrified, utterly at a loss for what to do. They didn't realize that the Emperor was feeling the exact same way. His ears had visibly turned a deep shade of red. You can call me whatever you wish to call me. She confessed. She finally confessed. Leona finally revealed her identity as a witch to Zeros. And the moment Zeros learned the truth, he immediately dropped to his knees. In reality, he had always been looking forward to meeting the witch. Princess, you must have met my brother, haven't you? Seeing Zeros gradually become serious, Leona began to think back carefully. She seemed to have indeed met a guy who looked a lot like Zeros, so that person was his younger brother. Just like Zeros, that man always wore a nonchalant smile on his face. He was one of the very few humans whose strength was on par with Leona's. Furthermore, that person was constantly talking about his older brother. My older brother is incredibly strong, you know. He could take out trash like you with one hand behind his back. Upon hearing this, tears unconsciously slid down Zeros' cheeks, as he recalled the sheer joy on his little brother's face when he first learned magic. He truly never expected that this was how he appeared in his brother's heart. Princess, was my younger brother truly powerful? Leona was confused. She didn't understand why Zeros would ask such a question. After pondering for a moment, she replied with absolute certainty. He was powerful. He was incredibly powerful. Hearing this, Zeros smiled happily. He was my little brother. He has always been my pride and joy. After Zeros calmed down, the two of them resumed their search for the magic circle Lacus had left behind. But after searching for quite a while, they found absolutely nothing. Just as the two were feeling troubled by this, Leona suddenly noticed the Grim Reaper statue in front of her. It was the one Lacus had given her before. Even though she was very unwilling to believe it, she still reached her hand out toward the sculpture. Did you already plan on scheming against me even back then? When she flipped the statue over to look, she discovered a blue magic circle emblazoned on the bottom. It was a summoning spell. The moment it sensed the soul of the witch, Lacus would receive a notification immediately, and he could then summon the witch right to his side. Seeing this, Leona revealed a wicked smile. She was going to alter the magic circle on it. That way, the thing Lacus summoned would no longer be her, but rather some truly interesting creatures.
Zeros finally realized something at this moment. You're the witch? Then doesn't that mean you and Lacus were lovers? Then why do you want to kill him?
Hearing this, Leona instantly paused her movements. He proposed to me that day, but what he gave me wasn't a ring. Instead, it was a decisive sword thrust straight through my heart. She would never, ever forget what happened that day. So if that guy ever fell into her hands, she would definitely make him regret ever being born into this world. Once she finished, she tossed a book to Zeros. It was a book for learning the language of the demon realm. This made Zeros overjoyed. He hurriedly pulled Leona into a tight hug. Her Highness is the absolute best. When she returned to the banquet later, Leona couldn't find her daddy or the others anywhere, making her feel a little lonely. Everyone else was gathered together in groups of 2 or 3, but she was... Just then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Little Rabbit, are you looking for us?" The heartwarming scene before her instantly left Leona stunned. What on earth had happened while she was away? Before she could overthink it, the Emperor's voice reached her ears. He was holding his arms wide open. "Leona, come here quickly." Leona smiled. Why did she have such foolish thoughts just now? She then quickly ran toward the Emperor. "Daddy, I'm coming." Everyone here was her family. How could she possibly be lonely? She should be feeling incredibly happy instead. On the other side, the defeated Lacus arrived at the temple. He knew the temple supported only one person, His Highness the First Prince. Therefore, upon meeting the bishop, he directly informed him that Leona's body housed the soul of the witch. Hearing this, the bishop's face was filled with shock. "Can you take responsibility for your words?" Lacus, perfectly composed, stated that he had proof. A magic circle then appeared in his hand. It was a summoning magic circle connected to the witch's subspace. He had just sensed movement within that subspace, a place only the witch could enter. He was now almost entirely certain that Leona was the witch herself. He believed that as long as he exposed Leona's identity as the witch, the temple would definitely take action against her. When the temple and the empire inevitably clashed, he would be in the perfect position to reap the benefits. As the summoning magic circle fully expanded, the entire temple began to shake violently. But in the next second, the scene before him left Lacus utterly dumbfounded. The creature summoned from the circle was none other than an ancient wyvern. The bishop was completely bewildered. "Lacus, this is what you call a witch?" At the same time, Leona also sensed the movement from the magic circle. "Lacus, I hope you like the present I sent you." He had changed. He really had changed. The normally icy emperor had finally made a change. Because Leona had awakened the paternal love hidden deep in his heart, he was now learning to start caring for his other children. And Nikal, who had always been terrified of the emperor, held the emperor's hand for the very first time. The warmth spreading from his palm told him that this wasn't a dream. Because of this, he immediately decided to participate in this year's hunting tournament. He absolutely had to catch 2 decent demonic beasts. He would offer one beast's mana crystal to his royal father, and give the other one to Leona. Hearing this, the emperor smiled happily. "You truly dote on your little sister. Very good." Nikal's cheeks instantly flushed red with embarrassment. After all, this was the very first time he had received praise from his royal father. Witnessing this scene, Harik was extremely pleased. "It seems that moving forward, your majesty will be playing the role of a loving father. You truly must thank Her Highness the Princess properly." Unexpectedly, the stubborn emperor didn't want to admit it. "Why should I specifically go and thank the princess? In the past, those princes didn't even dare to approach you. It was Her Highness's adorableness that changed you. It is a true blessing to have Her Highness the Princess in this palace." Hearing this, the emperor slowly set his teacup down. "Humph, as if you needed to tell me that." Meanwhile, Leona was pondering how to expand her own sphere of influence. After all, the first step to becoming the emperor was to gain the support of the nobles. Zeros offered a suggestion regarding this: participating in the upcoming hunting tournament. It was the perfect opportunity to display her power. Unexpectedly, Leona began to tremble upon hearing this. Zeros thought she was afraid. But little did he know, Leona was trembling out of pure excitement. As a witch, she knew demonic beasts like the back of her hand. This time she was going to let everyone know she was a little genius. So she quickly found the emperor and stated that she wanted to participate in the hunting tournament. Hearing this, the emperor flatly refused. "That is far too dangerous." But Leona wasn't concerned. She was no longer the same as before. Her magic had already broken through to the 4th tier. Such talent even made the emperor gasp in surprise. Harik's jaw had already dropped to the floor. "Her Highness the Princess is as outstanding as always." "Since you're not saying anything, Daddy, that means you agree. Just wait, I'll catch a wyvern and bring it back for you. Then we can roast it together and taste it. I'm sure it'll be delicious." But unexpectedly, as soon as Leona stepped out of the palace, she ran into Rodri. When Rodri learned that she was participating in the hunting tournament, a look of worry clearly appeared on his face. He guessed it right away. Leona was doing this to win over the nobles. He absolutely couldn't just let that happen. Just then, Sherry ran over. "I have high hopes for you in this hunting tournament." She then handed Leona a strange object. "I picked this up specifically for you. Use it or don't, it's up to you." The day of the hunting tournament arrived in the blink of an eye. The nobles were all placing bets on the tournament's results. Many favored the first prince, while others favored the fourth prince, Nikal, because the vast majority of demonic beasts feared Nikal's power of the sun god. However, one spectacled noble stood out from the rest. He placed every single one of his chips on Leona. Ever since their last meeting, he had been completely captivated by Leona's adorableness. Before long, Leona and the other participants also arrived at the scene. After Harik announced the rules from the stage, the hunting tournament officially began. But the moment Leona stepped into the forest, she sensed a killing intent hidden in the shadows. Moreover, it was strange. She had searched for quite a while yet hadn't seen a single demonic beast. Little did she know, two individuals from the temple were currently watching everything from above. They had already driven away all the demonic beasts in the vicinity. Their goal was to ensure Leona couldn't gain any honor in the tournament, thus keeping the first Prince Rodri's political power as stable as ever. But right at that moment, an unimaginable scene unfolded before them. A massive explosion erupted behind them, followed by the appearance of a colossal demonic beast with glowing red eyes. The burly priest instantly panicked. "Why is this thing here?" Such a huge commotion naturally attracted Leona's attention as well. By now, she had figured it out. It was the temple playing dirty tricks behind the scenes. If that's the case, then I'll just have to eliminate you all. Meanwhile, Nikal and Rodri had already completed their hunting tasks, yet they still hadn't seen any sign of Leona. Afraid that something had happened to her, they quickly sought out Harik. Learning of Leona's disappearance sent a violent jolt through Harik's heart. And all of this was heard clearly by the Emperor, who was standing right behind them. In an instant, terrifying ice magic swept through the entire forest. "If I just level this entire forest, I'll be able to find Leona immediately,"